Chapter 1001. According to this guy's words, regardless of whether Zhang Dihai recognized him as his son or not, he was his son. It was legally recognized. It was fine to sever the father-son relationship now, but he had to give him 1/3 of the family property because this was what he deserved. If he didn't give it to him, he would find some hooligans to block the entrance of this supermarket all day long, shouting and making trouble. If he wasn't afraid of losing face, he wasn't afraid either. For such a person, although he always claimed that he had face, the problem was that he didn't have face. Hearing the old man Zhang Dihai's words, Zhang Hai didn't know what to say. Indeed, he couldn't say anything. It was said that it was difficult for an upright official to resolve a family dispute. The current situation was like this. If it was the Huaxia in ancient times, it would be easy to deal with. Being unfilial was a huge crime. In ancient times, there were often fathers and sons who quarreled. The father took a piece of wood and opened his head. He went to the yamen and beat the drum, saying that his son was unfilial and reporting to the yamen. The yamen would say, "Do you want him alive or dead?" If he's dead, he would be beaten to death. If he's alive, he would be beaten half to death. If he's unfilial, he would be beaten half to death again. This was also the reason why the father-in-law and mother-in-law in ancient times were so terrifying. The former daughter-in-law dared to talk back to her mother-in-law. She could beat you to death with just a word. Moreover, you would be beaten to death with the reputation of being unfilial. Your maternal family wouldn't be able to straighten their backs in this life. Your maternal family would also scold you. This was the situation in the past. But the problem now was that whether it was the United States or Huaxia, they all had to pay attention to human rights, especially the United States. You want to sever the father-son relationship? Sure, but isn't your blood flowing in his body? Some illegitimate children had to be raised for a lifetime, not to mention such a legally recognized father-son relationship. It was useless even if he made trouble. It was precisely because he knew this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but bite his teeth. It was really troublesome. Hey, don't think too much about it. I just felt uncomfortable in my heart. Now that I've said it, I feel much better. If this guy dares to come again, I'll beat him to death. Looking at Zhang Hai's appearance, Zhang Dihai said with a smile. But Zhang Hai knew that he couldn't be so cruel. But these words didn't matter. The key was to see what the old man thought. For these things, Zhang Hai couldn't help, so he could only speed up his eating. Things like being unfilial were very common in Huaxia. Some of them were unfilial because of their parents, and some were because of their children. Every day, there were people who were unfilial. But what was the use of it? Even the law couldn't do anything about it. So who could? So for these people, everyone could only pin their hopes on the legendary retribution. But as far as the current situation was concerned, good people generally died early, and such bad people actually lived longer. After eating here, his mood was a little heavy, but his taste buds were very satisfied. Zhang Hai drove, left here, and went directly to Tunglong Company. Tunglong was actually just a translated name, Flying Dragon. You could translate it as Tunglong or Long Tongue. It didn't matter. Zhang Hai drove quickly to his company. He and the Moses Adams law firm were still on the same floor, but today he didn't visit them. Instead, he went directly to the company. When he arrived at the front desk, he found that the person at the front desk had changed. Jenny Pound, who he had recruited, was no longer at the front desk. In fact, she had been promoted to a middle-level supervisor in the sales department a few months ago. Her immediate superior was Zheng Jin, and she had a lot of power in this company. The new receptionist was two very beautiful girls. After all, the front desk represented the image of a company. Naturally, they would find some young and beautiful girls here. But there were also some state-owned enterprises that liked to use some old people. Maybe it was to show that they were very clean. Maybe it was like this: "Hello, sir. How can I help you?" Seeing Zhang Hai come over, the two girls didn't know Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai didn't have any personal worship, and there was no portrait of him in the company. It was reasonable that they didn't know him. "Oh, I'm Zhang Hai. I'm here to look for Zheng Jin." Hearing the two girls' words, Zhang Hai also smiled and said to the two girls. When the two girls heard Zhang Hai's words, they were instantly stunned. Although they didn't know Zhang Hai, they had at least heard of him. Then one of them immediately called Zheng Jin to confirm Jiang Hai's identity. After Zheng Jin saw Jiang Hai's appearance, he naturally confirmed that this was Jiang Hai himself. "Chairman, I'm sorry. We are new, so..." After confirming that this was Jiang Hai, the two girls couldn't help but panic. "It's okay. You are doing what you were supposed to do. Very good, do it well." Hearing the two's words, Jiang Hai smiled. The other party was doing their job, so he naturally had no reason to make things difficult for them. He strode directly over. After walking into the company, Jiang Hai saw that the entire company was a little busy at this time. Everyone was walking at a fast speed. There was no other way. Although the Tunglong company was still a new company, their orders had never been small. Relying on Jiang Hai's beef, fish, and forage, their planes almost never stopped for more than 3 days. They flew to all parts of the United States, Canada, Australia, Xia, South Korea, the Middle East, and even now, they had opened up flights to Japan. It could be said that the Tunglong company's planes went to all over the world. It was precisely because Zheng Jin's distribution was very good, coupled with their strong original strength. They also received a lot of orders in addition to Jiang Hai's orders. At least the locals in Boston trusted the Tunglong company. Now nearly 1/20th of the large companies in the country used the Tunglong company's planes to transport things. Credibility was the most important thing in this kind of logistics. Instead of saying that they believed in the Tunglong company, it was better to say that they believed in Jiang Hai. Even if there was any problem with the goods, Jiang Hai could afford to pay for it. It was precisely because of this that the Tunglong company's development speed was completely unmatched by ordinary new companies. Even Moses Adams calculated that without the addition of Jiang Hai's wealth, the current market value of the Tunglong company was about $8 billion. Although it was not big, it was definitely not small. It was even bigger than the Qi family when Jiang Hai first obtained the Dragon Balls. The original Zheng Jin was also more and more powerful at this time. This should be what she learned from Qi Li. "What brings you here? What's the matter?" When Jiang Hai walked in, Zheng Jin was lying there checking documents. She did not even raise her head because she knew that it was Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also casually sat on the sofa next to her. In fact, in Zheng Jin's heart, Jiang Hai was a good boss who knew how to make good use of people and knew how to delegate power, but he was definitely not a good man or a good businessman. As a man, in her opinion, he should only love one woman. A stallion, a harem, and the like were not desirable. Secondly, he did not have the ambition or the desire for revenge that a man should have. In her opinion, Jiang Hai was just a person who had good luck. If it was not because this was indeed a place where she could develop her revenge, she would not have come to work here. In her opinion, men should be the kind of people who talked big and had lofty dreams. They might be dormant now, but they would definitely be the kind of people who would amaze the world with a brilliant feat in the future. If Jiang Hai knew her thoughts, he would probably laugh. Because the kind of person in her imagination, if he lived well, he would be the leader of a cult. If he did not live well, he would be the leader of a distribution organization. Indeed, he always thought that he was very strong, had ambition, and wanted revenge. In fact, he was basically a liar. A real person would understand what it meant to be down to earth. Although Jiang Hai was not a person with ambition or revenge, at least he was not stupid. He knew what he could have and what he could not. Therefore, it was not just luck that allowed him to develop to his current state. Secondly, Jiang Hai was indeed not a businessman like Zheng Jin thought. In fact, he could not be considered a businessman at all. It would be better to say that he was a farmer. If the Tunglong company was Zheng Jin's, it might be worth tens of billions of dollars now. Raising funds, going public, and opening branches. In Zheng Jin's opinion, since Jiang Hai had such resources and could even cooperate with Walmart, why not find an opportunity to become Walmart's exclusive logistics provider? If he opened a company from all over the country, he would earn more, expand his business, and have a greater sense of achievement. However, in Jiang Hai's opinion, it was also more dangerous. If he did not do well, this company might not belong to the Jiang family. Jiang Hai rarely took risks. No matter what, he would guarantee that he had an 80% chance of winning. That was why he would take such a risk. He did not believe that he was the son of this dimension, and could turn the situation around. He knew that if he took a wrong step, he would lose everything. It could be said that Jiang Hai and Zheng Jin's ideas were completely opposite, but this did not prevent her from working for him. Nothing much. I just want to pay the taxes of my manor. What about the company's taxes? Have you paid them all? Looking at Zheng Jin, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. He also knew what kind of person she was, so he naturally did not care about her attitude. Yes, I have. I was going to ask Valentina to bring the report to you this week, but now that you are here, you can take it back directly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zheng Jin raised her head and looked at Jiang Hai seriously. Then she took out a report from her drawer and handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took a look at it. To be honest, he was quite satisfied. The Tenglong company had only been open for about a year, but last year's report showed that except for the initial investment, it had basically broken even and even made a little profit, which was very rare. Chapter 1002. Jiang Hai came up with the idea of setting up the Tenglong company around this time last year. Prawalton and Qi Li had both talked to Jiang Hai about setting up their own brand, and Qi Li was the one who contributed the most. When she came to Jiang Hai last year, she mentioned it to Jiang Hai. So, under her lead, Jiang Hai set up the Tenglong company. In the beginning, the register capital was 200 million, which was cash. Because Jiang Hai didn't set up the Tenglong company to make money by going public, he really took out $200 million to set up the company and appointed Zheng Jin as the general manager, which was also the CEO. In the beginning, the $200 million was used to hire people, buy a plane, find a guarantor, rent a building, and so on. In the beginning, the main business was Jiang Hai's business, which was to transport beef to some cities in China and Walmart. According to Prawalton, this way, at least the logistics would be under Jiang Hai's control. If there were any problems, Jiang Hai wouldn't be able to take off, and they might even spoil Jiang Hai's beef. So, when Jiang Hai set up the company, he thought that he would rather lose money than make money from the beef business. This was human nature. Jiang Hai wasn't familiar with the company, but he was obviously more familiar with the beef business. After that, he sold fish, and then Zheng Jin set up the company. In the first year, the company was bound to lose money. Jiang Hai was prepared to lose millions or even tens of millions. But when he looked at the report today, he realized that Zheng Jin was indeed amazing. Last year, the company registered $200 million, with a total income of $37 million and a total expenditure of $29 million. In other words, in 1 year, Jiang Hai's company not only made a name for itself, but also made $8 million. This was really surprising. Of course, the $8 million couldn't be earned because they had to pay taxes. Compared to Jiang Hai's manor, which had all kinds of subsidies, the Tenglong company didn't have anything. They only had a 0.5% tax discount for hiring people who didn't have Social Security. No matter which country it was, business taxes were the heaviest compared to farmers, ranchers, and fishermen. Looking at the report in his hand, Jiang Hai nodded with satisfaction. It seemed that it was a very clear choice to hand the company over to Zheng Jin. After closing the report, Jiang Hai chatted with Zheng Jin for a while and then prepared to leave. It couldn't be helped. Zheng Jin didn't like Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai didn't have the habit of sticking his warm face to people who ignored him. So, since the company was handed over to her, Jiang Hai was relieved. There was nothing to say. After a few polite words, Jiang Hai prepared to leave. As soon as he left Zheng Jin's office, Jiang Hai was pulled into the office next door by Rallis Carter. As soon as Jiang Hai entered, he saw Biliak, Valentine, and Alez Sarah, who had just left yesterday. Although these girls could only be with Jiang Hai for 2 days a week, they really relied on Jiang Hai. Seeing that Jiang Hai came over, whether he came to see them or not, they were very happy. Seeing that they were happy, Jiang Hai was also very happy. Originally, according to Jiang Hai's plan, he wanted to stay here until the evening. He didn't want to spend the night here, but at least he wanted to have dinner with Rallis Carter and the others. However, just at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Jiang Hai's schedule was interrupted by a phone call. Hello, is this Mr. Jiang? I'm calling from Google. The set of holographic smart home system that you ordered has been developed. When is it convenient for you? We can come over and install it for you. When the phone was picked up, a Mandarin voice came from the other side. He had to admit that Google was worthy of being the largest IT company now. They even arranged a person who could speak Huaxia for Jianghai to make a phone call. Moreover, the person's pronunciation was perfect, not plastic at all. Of course, the sooner the better. I'm available at my place. However, at this time, Jianghai's attention was not on the person who called him. What he wanted most now was the black technology that this person mentioned, the smart home system. Okay, if that's the case, we will arrive at your home in an hour to install it for you. Hearing Jianghai say that the sooner the better, the female voice on the other end had nothing to doubt. After all, this kind of thing was very tempting to the people at Google. After hanging up the phone, Jianghai could only apologize to the four girls, then went downstairs, drove his car, and rushed to his manor. It turned out that these people probably called Jianghai after they shipped the system to Boston. Because only 5 minutes after Jianghai arrived at his manor, a pickup truck with the Google logo on it arrived outside Jianghai's manor. Jianghai had just parked the car and didn't even have time to take a sip of water before these people came in. "Hello, you're Mr. Jiang, right?" After everyone walked in, a young man who looked like a Chinese asked Jianghai with a slight Lu accent. "Well, yes, I am. How long will it take to install this thing?" When he was at Google, Jianghai had already studied this system with Larry Page and the others. The system's intelligence was divided into beginner, intermediate, advanced, and top level. The beginner system was the same as Apple's Siri and iBrain. It would answer whatever you asked, and it would not think for itself. Basically, it was like having a mobile phone that could talk, but this mobile phone could connect to your whole family. The intermediate system was slightly better. For example, if you asked it to sing, its camera would observe the situation in the real world, and it would search for some songs that fit the current atmosphere on the internet. For example, if you were having a party, it would play some high songs. For example, if you were sad, it would play some sad songs, and so on. However, it would not be able to make too complicated a response. For example, if it was cold outside, it would turn on the air conditioner and adjust the temperature according to what you were doing. If you were exercising, it would adjust the temperature a little lower. If you were watching TV, it would adjust the temperature a little higher. If you were watching TV, it would adjust the temperature a little higher. If you're watching TV, it would tell you that the weather outside was good, and it would tell you if you should open the curtains. There was no need to design it. For example, if you were to wake up at night, a small night light would turn on when you woke up, and if you were lying in bed, it would turn off, and so on. Basically, it was almost the same as a servant. At the same time, it would be much easier for Chia to cook because it could autonomously connect to the electrical appliances. It could adjust how long the oven needed to bake, how high the temperature was, and how long the microwave needed to be used. It was very convenient. It was precisely because of these functions that Jianghai decided to install this thing. First, it was because of the black technology. Second, it was because this thing was really powerful. Moreover, this thing could connect to Jianghai's Google Glass. It could really be like Iron Man, directly making a 3D structure of anything in front of Jianghai, and it would rotate with Jianghai's hand. Originally, the beginner and intermediate systems still needed a huge host and a huge platform project, but the advanced system did not need that. In this way, Jianghai could save a lot of space in his home. This depends on how many things you want to connect. The adaptation of the host is very fast, but the connection is a bit troublesome. After hearing Jianghai's words, the installation worker also smiled and said. Then Jianghai installed the host in his room. He had already prepared for it. He opened a secret door in the wall and placed the host there. After installing the host, these people began to install the engine and receiver in Jianghai's home. For example, the curtains naturally needed a receiver to receive the signal of the host, and then the engine to open the curtains. Although it was just a simple action, it also needed some things. Curtains, wardrobes, and various lights in the home, the fish tank outside, the kitchen appliances. It can be said that in addition to Jianghai's warehouses, all the other places were connected to this thing. They started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and finished at 9 o'clock in the evening. The girls in Jianghai's house stared at the 4 workers who came over. Perhaps it was the first time the four workers were surrounded by so many beautiful women. For a moment, they felt a little embarrassed. Jiang Hai's eyes were fixed on the four workers, but the speed and enthusiasm of the work were clearly much faster. At 6 o'clock, Jiang Hai asked Chia to make dinner and entertain these people at home. It was said that those who received benefits were soft-hearted, and those who received benefits were short-sighted. After eating such high-end cuisine in Jiang Hai's place, these people were more diligent. Finally, at 9:30 in the evening, the system was completely finished. Here are some simple instructions and the password to hibernate it. As long as you can restart or hibernate it, and no one else can, this system is yours. There is no backdoor. If you break this thing, it's over. The biggest concern of rich people for this kind of intelligent system was whether this guy would betray others. If the people behind it knew what he did, for example, Google, wouldn't it be troublesome? Americans were very particular about privacy. Therefore, this thing was designed in this way. It was such a system, and this system only had one owner, Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai broke this system, he would have to buy a new one. This thing was the real big deal. Jiang Hai was very happy with this setting, so he gave the 5 people a tip of $200 each. The 5 people left satisfied. Today's work was not in vain, and after these people left, Jiang Hai was a little eager to try it out. Turn on. Ding. Retrieve command. Authority check 0000. Level 1 highest authority. The machine is starting. Chapter 1003. As the cold air from the north became more and more unable to withstand the warm wind from the equator, the warm air from the wind slowly pushed the cold air from the north away. At the place where the hot and cold air intersected, the first rain of early spring began to fall. As the smell of spring got closer and closer, Jiang Hai's manor also entered spring. The trees that had lost their leaves began to quickly grow new buds, and the grassland that had not died to begin with grew larger and larger. The grass seeds that Jiang Hai had sown in March also began to grow rapidly under the spring wind and rain. The temperature quickly rose to above zero. During the day, it could even reach more than 10 degrees, and at night, it could reach 5 or 6 degrees. The cattle were once again placed on the grassland to forage for food in order to reduce the fat they had gained during the winter. Vegetables began to grow, grapes began to bloom, and everything was moving forward according to the original script of nature. It was said that the plan of a year was in spring, and the plan of a day was in the morning. This was something that Jiang Hai had heard from his teachers and parents since he was a child, but he had never put it into practice. Because it was early in the morning when Chia, and Aphrodite had all left to get busy, Jiang Hai just strolled around the corridor outside before returning to the villa. Lying on his jade recliner against the window, he made a cup of tea and scrolled through his phone while watching the rain outside. This rain is really annoying, Jiang Hai muttered softly as he continued to scroll through his phone. Spring rain rarely had that kind of heavy rain, lightning, thunder, and the like. Those were all summer rain. Spring rain was more of a continuous drizzle, not heavy, but not light either. Once it started, it would be endless like a thunderstorm. After about half an hour, the rain would fall and the sky would clear up. But this rain, Jiang Hai knew that it started at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. At that time, he just got up to go to the bathroom. Unknowingly, it had been drifting for 6 hours, but it was still drifting. You definitely cannot use an umbrella, but if you use one, it's still very annoying because it keeps raining and it's not that heavy. Fortunately, Edward Anderson and the rest were already used to such rain. Except for those who were cleaning the cow dung and the cow sheet, the others were all wearing raincoats, riding horses, and looking at the cows on the grassland outside. Jiang Hai also went to the cow sheet in the morning, mainly to take a look and then to talk to his little Xia. After that, he came back. To be honest, Jiang Hai had very few things to do every day. He did not have any other good points, but he trusted his subordinates. Therefore, unless it was necessary, he would not give orders in front of Edward Anderson and Robbins Garcia. Of course, these people knew how to behave. When Jiang Hai was around, no matter what they did, they would ask for instructions from Jiang Hai. Even if Jiang Hai didn't know, as much as they did. Jiang Hai was also clear about his own situation. To put it bluntly, he was a loser in the past. But now, he was still a loser. It was just that he had evolved from a beginner poor loser to a senior rich loser. He didn't know how to herd cows, so he delegated the authority to Robbins Garcia. He didn't know how to raise fish, so he delegated the authority to Edward Anderson. He didn't know how to run a company, so he delegated the authority to Zheng Jin. He didn't know how to grow grapes or brew wine, so he delegated the authority to Dulles Gerard. There was nothing much to say. Jiang Hai was such a person. His daily sitting time in the manor was very stable. He woke up around 8 in the morning, had breakfast, and then went out for a walk. If the weather was good, he would walk more. If the weather was bad, like today, he would walk less. After 9, he would come back around 10. Then he would relax, watch TV, read novels, watch variety shows, play games, use his phone, and drink tea. At noon, Chia came back for lunch. Then, in the afternoon, he would continue to relax, watch TV, read novels, watch variety shows, play games, use his phone, and drink tea. It was the same cycle. After dinner, he would go to the hot spring to take a bath and then sleep. Of course, from time to time, there would be some things that only people above the age of 18 could watch. This didn't need to be explained in detail. This was Jiang Hai's day. Some people would say that Jiang Hai wasn't tired of doing this all the time. Jiang Hai would say that he wasn't tired of it at all because this was the life he wanted. Now, he had money and he had beautiful women. Moreover, there was more than one. He had all kinds of beautiful women. What was there for him to be dissatisfied with? He ate delicacies and slept with beautiful women. He wouldn't exchange it for an emperor, okay? But then again, Jiang Hai was originally the local emperor of Winthrop. This was inevitable. Ding, ding, ding. Sir, you have a guest. Just as Jiang Hai was sitting there wasting time, a voice suddenly rang in his ears. This voice was a woman's voice. It was soft, but with a hint of mechanical and incongruous feeling. It was similar to some of the navigation systems on mobile phones in China. However, it didn't sound harsh. Instead, it was very comfortable. This was the smart system of Jiang Hai's house. Currently, in Jiang Hai's house, except for the warehouse, almost all the electrical appliances and furniture were controlled by this fellow. It was indeed a lot more convenient. For example, when Jiang Hai woke up at night to go to the toilet, the lights in the toilet would automatically light up when he walked into the toilet. When he went to the corridor, the lights in the corridor would also light up, and the adjustments were just right. Jiang Hai had a big fish tank with many arowanas. Changing the water, adjusting the water, adding oxygen, and everything else was done by this system. It was quite good. In the morning, when Jiang Hai stood next to the window, the curtains would automatically open. If Jiang Hai leaned forward, the window would open. If it was raining outside and the rain would enter, it would automatically close. It was very convenient. For example, when Jiang Hai opened the fridge, the special Google Glass he was wearing would form a light green interface in front of him. It would point out how long it had been stored, how many calories it had, how long it had been stored, how long it had been stored, and how long it had been stored, how many calories it had, how long it had been stored, 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 how many calories it had, how long it had been stored, how long it had been stored, how long it had been stored, and how long it had been stored. And Jiang Hai was also good to this system. He gave a name, Sister. Well, Jiang Hai really didn't know how to give a name. Who is it? Hearing his sister's voice in his ear, Jiang Hai asked her with some doubts. Then the camera installed at the gate moved. Jiang Hai's glasses flashed, and in the next second, a picture appeared in front of him. It was a car that was slowly coming to a stop. After the car stopped, Mayor Walls got out of the car with an umbrella and was about to ring the doorbell. "Oh, it's the mayor. Please come in." But before he could ring the doorbell, Jiang Hai's voice had already reached his ears. This startled him, and he looked around in surprise. But then he looked at the door that was slowly opening. He was also a little surprised, but he still returned to the car, started the engine, and drove into Jiang Hai's manor. When he drove in, the door was closed. Looking at the drizzle outside, coupled with Jiang Hai's strange door, he was a little confused. But thinking that it was still daytime, he still drove the car to the parking lot. After getting out of the car, he was about to knock on the door. But before he could knock, the door opened. He glanced behind the door, and there was no one behind it. He was a little scared. Fortunately, he saw Jiang Hai drinking tea in the hall at this time, but he still didn't dare to enter the house. He looked at Jiang Hai with one foot inside and the other outside, looking around his house. Hey, are you okay? Is there something in your house? Mayor Wallace whispered to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. It's okay, it's my smart system, not a ghost. It's high-tech. You old people don't understand. Waving his hand at him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. At the same time, he stood up. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, although there were still some doubts, Mayor Wallace also roughly understood. It's not a supernatural phenomenon. That's good. After changing his shoes, he walked into Jiang Hai's house and sat on Jiang Hai's sofa. Jiang Hai also walked to the refrigerator. What do you want to drink? Looking at Mayor Wallace, Jiang Hai asked him. Drinks are fine. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also said with a smile. Then Jiang Hai poured him a glass of freshly squeezed blueberry juice and placed it in front of him. What's the matter? After all, the two had known each other for 3 years. Although their friendship might not be particularly deep, at least they were quite familiar with each other. Mayor Wallace had come to Jiang Hai's house at least dozens of times. Sometimes he came all day long, sometimes he came once a month or two, but basically, he rarely came when he had nothing to do. He came here for business. I came to discuss with you. The Poseidon Festival is coming soon. The coastal Winthrop would hold a Poseidon Festival every year. Jiang Hai also knew about this. After all, he had participated in it twice. This was the 3rd time. That's a good thing. Do you want me to donate some money, or what? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai nodded. Because Jiang Hai himself also ran a fishing industry, he was not opposed to such festivals. Rather than saying that it was a superstition, it was better to say that it was a tradition and a vision for a better life. Naturally, he fully supported it. In addition, this festival didn't cost much money. For Jiang Hai, who had already paid the taxes, it was just a drop in the ocean. Chapter 1004. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace shook his head with a smile, and then said to Jiang Hai, Money doesn't matter. After all, it doesn't cost much, but I hope you can participate in the main process this year. I'll participate. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai looked at him with some doubts. This old man is not wrong, right? Participate by myself? Participate in what? Like last year, to set a fish tank free? Or do something else? This year, Winthrop has a lot of tax surplus, so I'm going to make this festival more lively, unlike the previous years when it was just a tour and a market. This year, I'm going to organize some activities, but as an old man, I really don't know how to do it, so I'm going to hand this matter over to Winthrop. You're the richest man in our town, and many people in the town work for you, so you should also participate, be an advisor or something like that. If you have nothing to do recently, you can go to the town to take a look and give some advice. Looking at Jiang Hai's doubtful eyes, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but say with a smile. It could be seen that he was really happy now. Oh, Winthrop, things between me and Sandy don't seem to be very good. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's first reaction at first was that it didn't matter. Just like Mayor Wallace said, he really had nothing to do, so he stayed at home all day long. It was not much different from sitting and chatting with others in the town hall. After all, he didn't need to contact people. If he went there, he would just give some advice or veto some people's opinions. This life was not tiring or busy, so Jiang Hai could go there every morning when he had nothing to do, but the problem was that the person he chose was a little awkward. Hey, Jiang Hai, this is the United States. Even if something did happen between you and Sandy, you are now the consultant, and she is the person in charge. I asked her when I came here, and she said there was no problem. You are a man, so why are you embarrassed? Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little hesitant in front of him, Mayor Wallace waved his hand. Well, okay. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment, but since Winthrop didn't care about it, Jiang Hai didn't need to care about it. After settling this matter with Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace was obviously very happy. After drinking his drink, he drove his car back. In the afternoon, Jiang Hai also talked to Qi Jie and the others who came back. They didn't care about Jiang Hai's participation in the sea god ceremony. Instead, they were even angrier when they saw that Jiang Hai was lying at home every day. Now that Jiang Hai had something to do, they were quite happy. As for Winthrop, according to Qi Jie, if something happened to them, it would have happened long ago. Once it happened, they would have nothing to do with it. Moreover, Jiang Hai would come back at night. If he found that he was not as capable as he wanted to be, he could find trouble with Jiang Hai. Regarding this, Jiang Hai could only smile awkwardly and had nothing to say. Early the next morning, the rain, which had been raining for almost 20 hours, stopped last night, perhaps because it sensed that Jiang Hai was going out. Jiang Hai walked around the manor in the morning and had breakfast. When he came out, it was a sunny day. With the mood of a spring outing, Jiang Hai drove his battle shield in the direction of the town. After getting on the road, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. Winthrop really didn't lack money now. Although there was no such thing as a local tax in Massachusetts, there would be a rebate for state taxes. Not to mention others, just the taxes that Jiang Hai paid would be about 20 million yuan that would be allocated to Winthrop's town hall. After all, it was inevitable that the person who paid the taxes would have the highest tax rebate. Moreover, the current income of Winthrop's residents was quite considerable, even if Jiang Hai wasn't included. The annual income of the American middle class depended on the average income. Taking the middle class as an example, the state with the highest income in the United States was Maryland, where the average household income was $72,483. The lower middle class income was $48,322, and the upper middle class income was $144,966. After Maryland was Alaska, New Jersey, Hawaii, Washington, D.C., Connecticut, and Massachusetts, which ranked 7th in the United States because this state's territory was really too small. The average income of the middle class in Massachusetts was $66,768. This referred to the family, which was men and women. Of course, in the United States, being a housewife was also a job, but it didn't have an income. The lower limit was $44,512, and the upper limit was $133,536. Those who earned more than this amount in a year were the high-income group. The people who filed tax returns in Winthrop this year were not underage children and some very old people. There were a total of 6,217 people who filed tax returns before the legal age, and the average income was $112,005. It could be said that the income of the people in Winthrop was quite good. Now, they didn't have to pay the lowest tax rate anymore. They had to pay the third tax rate, which was 25%. Of course, the benefits they received were also better. Last year, the total income of Winthrop's population was $696,335,085, which is almost $700 million. The main source of income was tourism. Of course, agriculture, animal husbandry, and fishing also accounted for a certain proportion of the income. However, from about 60% in the past, they now accounted for 15% of the income. The remaining 85% was brought in by tourism. The poisoning incident in the winter didn't affect Winthrop's tourism too much. This was because the people who had been here before knew how good this place was. Therefore, the people who caused the incident didn't seem to have any effect other than making Winthrop more popular. Just like everyone knew that going to Hainan and Huaxia would be very expensive. It was not cheap to buy seafood, and it was not cheap to go out and have fun. It was easy to be slandered. However, there was still an endless stream of people going there. Moreover, Winthrop was really not slandered. With the tax returns brought in by them and Jiang Hai, although the Winthrop Town Hall wasn't the richest town hall in the United States, it wasn't short of money. It hired people to clean the place, and the social benefits were quite good. Jiang Hai had been here for 3 years. It could be said that Winthrop was changing every year, and this change was for the better. The sky was still blue, and the ground was still green. There were no high-rise buildings or factories. The environment was getting better and better compared to 3 years ago. People were earning more and more. Jiang Hai felt that this was what it meant to have a positive development. During Christmas last year, the town hall paid for the whole town to go to the movies. Of course, they went separately. They also distributed food, oil, flour, and so on to everyone. As long as you were a taxpayer, you could take a tax voucher and get some food and a few movie tickets. All the movies were very popular, and it was quite good. In addition to these benefits, there were also many public benefits. For example, they were planning to build 2 parks. One was a marine park, and the other was a land park. The park would be located opposite the town and Jianghai's manor. After all, Jianghai's manor was too big. The 2 parks didn't charge entrance fees, but some of the entertainment facilities in them required money. However, this park was still under construction. It was estimated that it would be completed by the end of this year. It could be considered as adding 2 more attractions to the town. Secondly, another hospital was built. The town's primary school and middle school received a sum of money to renovate the classrooms and build a library. At the same time, it was convenient for the town's transportation. As mentioned before, there were no public buses in the town. There were only some cars that went to the scenic spots. But now there was public transportation. There were a total of 6 buses in the town, and all of them were electric cars. It was energy efficient and environmentally friendly. There was a special line by the sea. You could get off at those stations to swim, pick up shells, catch crabs, and sit on the bus to enjoy the scenery. Other lines were to the sea, the dock, the horse farm, the villa area, and so on. Everything was available. In order to let everyone enjoy better public benefits, Winthrop had started to expand the roads. The road from Winthrop to Boston was the main road, which passed by Jianghai's house. Jianghai drove out his house and saw a lot of people building the road. The original 4-lane road became 6-lane, and there were bicycle paths, pedestrian paths, electric lights, garbage cans, and flyovers. Those flyovers were like escalators. You don't need to move. You can sit on the escalators and go down. Such flyovers were only available in the city centers of a few big cities in China. For example, Jianghai's hometown, Bing City, did not have such flyovers. But now, Jianghai's hometown had them. One had to admit that Mayor Wallace and the rest were willing to spend money to develop Winthrop. The benefits were good, the infrastructure was good, and the environment was good. What reason was there not to attract people? If you wanted to see anything, you could find it here. If you wanted to shop, you could find it here. If you wanted to enjoy the scenery, you could find it here. If you wanted to find food, you could find it here. If you wanted to go out to sea, you could find it here. Winthrop was really a city where people would forget about time. There was no tour guide to show you the scenic spots, no small shops where you couldn't leave before you bought something, and no messy advertisements. Everything was out in the open. You could do whatever you wanted. What was called a high degree of freedom. This was the embodiment of a high degree of freedom. To be honest, Jianghai was quite satisfied with this place. If he was an ordinary person, he would be happy to live here. Chapter 1005. Obviously, Jianghai was not the only one who had such thoughts. As the cars slowly drove into the town, the number of people gradually increased. Basically, more than 95% of the people had a smile on their faces. Indeed, they were really happy. The locals earned a lot and had an easy job. How could they not be happy? The tourists also had a lot of fun here. If they were the kind of tourists who came to buy gold, they would not come to Winthrop. They would definitely go to New York to play. Those who came to Winthrop were those who had nothing to do. In order to make it easier for these tourists, Mayor Wallace specially asked the shops in the town to make Chinese signboards under the original signboards. All the road signs were also translated in Chinese, including the bus stops. At the same time, if they were tired of Winthrop, they could directly take a bus to Boston. Among the 6 buses in Winthrop, one of them was dedicated to the line between the airport and Boston. It took an hour to reach the airport and an hour to reach Boston. It was really convenient. Jianghai's car drove in and saw groups of tourists. At this time, they were either playing on the streets, fishing in the distant riverside fishing area, or shopping in the distance. They got along quite well with the local residents. Jianghai was also very pleased about this. After all, no one wanted to have a fire in their backyard. Not long after, Jianghai's car arrived outside the town hall. After parking the car, Jianghai walked inside. Although Winthrop made him feel very comfortable, he did not forget his purpose of coming here. After walking into the town hall, Jianghai walked straight to the guard. These people who worked in the town hall, even if they did not know Jiang Hai, they knew him. Today, these guards naturally knew Jiang Hai. When they saw Jiang Hai walking over, these people immediately stood up with smiles on their faces. "Hey, Mr. Jiang, what's the matter?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the guard asked him with a smile. "I'm here to find Shinny Clive to discuss this year's Poseidon Festival. Is she here?" Hearing the guard's question, Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded at him, then said politely. Since the guard was polite to him, Jiang Hai would also be polite to others. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the guard immediately said, Yes, Ms. Xanthi and the others are now discussing this year's Poseidon Festival. Turn left after you go to the first conference room." After thanking him, Jiang Hai also walked into the town hall. Since Winthrop became rich, the town hall also benefited from it. At least, the current government building, although it was still the same building, the interior decoration was much better than before. The new windows, the layout, the decoration style, and the bright European style, the new ceiling, the installed lights, and the floor made Jiang Hai feel that everything was right. Walking into the office of the town hall, many government staff smiled and nodded at Jiang Hai when they saw him, and Jiang Hai responded with a smile. At least, the atmosphere when Jiang Hai entered Winthrop was quite good. After walking into the government hall, Jiang Hai quickly found the conference room, but before he could knock on the door, a slightly stiff English voice sounded from inside. "The Poseidon Festival is our sea god. Our sea god is our sea god. Your Poseidon is bullshit. When the time comes, find some old Taoists and some monks to chant scriptures. Don't you have a lot of tattooed people here? Get them to kneel there naked and then have a banquet. You can eat as much as you want. Isn't Jiang Hai also a member of Winthrop? Ask him to contribute his beef and seafood to show his sincerity." Hearing the domineering voice inside, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown. What the hell is this? Mazu? Old Taoist? Monk? Are they from the same system? Asking me to have a banquet? Is this guy crazy? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He pushed the door open without knocking. After pushing the door open, he saw the situation inside the room. At this time, there were a total of 13 people sitting in the room. 11 of them were foreigners and 2 people with black hair and black eyes. He didn't know if they were from Huaxia or other Asian countries. When Jiang Hai pushed the door open, 10 of the 11 people here took the initiative to stand up and smile at Jiang Hai. The only one who didn't stand up was Shinny Clive. She still felt a little awkward when she met Jiang Hai. As for the 2 Asians, they frowned. If you're a tourist, go find the staff outside. This is not a place you can come in. The person who spoke just now looked at Jiang Hai with a look of superiority. He waved his hand at Jiang Hai and said very indifferently, "Oh, there's no place here that I can't come in. And if you want to leave, it should be you." Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and walked to the table very calmly. He pulled out a chair and sat down directly. "Mr. Jiang, you're here. Let me introduce you." Perhaps sensing the tense atmosphere in the room, a staff member came out with a smile to smooth things over. "These 2 are Huaxia folklore experts specially invited by our town hall. After all, Winthrop is now considered a tourist city, so in order to take care of the feelings of Huaxia tourists, we specially invited these 2. Looking at Jiang Hai, the staff member emphasized the identity of these 2 people. Hearing this, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows. "Huaxia experts? You're Huaxia people?" Gently tapping the table in front of him with his fingers, Jiang Hai looked at the 2 people with a faint smile. Of course, when he asked this question, he asked in Mandarin to confirm where these 2 people were from. "Hey, of course. We're all Huaxia people with good roots." After the 2 people heard Jiang Hai's words, the person who didn't speak just now smiled and spoke to Jiang Hai with a Beijing accent. However, Jiang Hai felt that his words were strange. Jiang Hai had also been to the imperial capital, so he naturally knew what the people there sounded like. Although it sounded a little similar now, Jiang Hai was very sure that even in the imperial capital, there were too few people who would speak like this now. After all, this was not the previous dynasty, right? Moreover, the more he listened to the words of these 2 people, the more strange it felt. It made Jiang Hai feel that there was a trace of strangeness. If you're Chinese, then you can leave. If you're a student, then go back to being a student. If you're a tourist, then be a tourist and listen to the nonsense you just said. Looking at the two people, Jiang Hai was not polite and directly said to them, "Hey, grandson, how can you talk to me like that? I'm an expert they invited." Hearing Jiang Hai tell them to get lost so rudely, the two people here couldn't stand it anymore. They slammed the table and stood up, then pointed at Jiang Hai with dissatisfaction. "Damn you! Get lost! Look at the bullshit you're talking about. Taoist priests, Mazu, monks, and Lu Shui banquet. If I were you, I would kill myself. You don't want to lose face." Hearing this guy still daring to talk back and even talking about his master, Jiang Hai didn't buy it. Who's the master here? In Winthrop, there was only one grandpa, and that was Jiang Hai. Both of you, please leave. Seeing that Jiang Hai was angry, the staff of Winthrop naturally stood on Jiang Hai's side. The staff who spoke to Jiang Hai just now stood up and said to the two people with a serious face. Seeing that the people from the town hall were standing on Jiang Hai's side, the two people also panicked a little. There were guards outside, and the guards were armed with guns. If they made a scene here, it would be disadvantageous to them. So they looked at each other and stood up. "Ashi, okay, you bastard, just wait for me." Looking at Jiang Hai, the person just now walked out of the room after saying this. Then he slammed the door, and the whole room trembled. "Where did you find these two idiots?" Looking at the two people leaving, Jiang Hai frowned and said with dissatisfaction, "Foreign language school. My brother is a student there." He said that he knew Asian students, so he introduced them. Hearing Jiang Hai's inquiry, a staff member nodded apologetically to Jiang Hai and whispered, "What are their names?" Hearing that they were introduced by a relative, Jiang Hai couldn't say anything, so he just asked casually. "The person who just raised an opinion is called Park Renmeng, and the person who just talked to you is called Li Mingyun." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Shinny Clive, who had been silent, said to Jiang Hai, "Who the hell? You were fooled. Those two are Koreans. They may have studied in the capital. I don't know where they learned the Beijing dialect from, but they fooled you. If Asians, especially Huaxia, Japan, and Korea, dressed the same and put on their own ethnic characteristics, it was really difficult to distinguish them. It was like this in China, let alone these foreigners. But as soon as they heard the names, they could tell that the difference between the names of these three countries was still very big. Koreans?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the staff here were all stunned. They were all a little confused. "Who knows? Let's not talk about it. If we talk about it again, we will make a mistake. Now, let's talk about the situation you discussed. Delete everything that the guy said just now. We are tourists from Huaxia, and we're not here to see these things." Glancing at the crowd in front of him, Jiang Hai directly waved his hand and said, "What a joke! Not to mention the mess in front, he would not agree to the banquet." Chapter 1006. These people in the town hall were not raised for nothing. After all, the United States was basically an employment system. There was no such thing as a secure job, even for the government. Therefore, for the government, being complained about was a big deal. It was very likely that they would lose their job, not just change their workplace. It was precisely because of this that the offices in the United States were more or less more efficient than those in Huaxia. Of course, because they did not earn much, their attitude was only so-called peaceful. There was no standard smiling service, but their efficiency was still quite fast. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, a person very close to him quickly handed the revised regulations to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai glanced at it. There were basically no problems. The parade, market, ceremony, and so on were similar to the previous years. It was still Blue Dragon. Blue Dragon had already prepared it 5 days ago. The glass tanks this year were more beautiful than the previous years. The length of the parade was longer, and the market was bigger. In addition to the trading place, there were also places to eat and play. Perhaps for the sake of the tourists, a new beach was specially opened at the original market beach. One could rent tents, reclining chairs, and swim in the sea. There were also motorboats and surfing on the beach. Seeing this, Jiang Hai crossed out swimming and surfing in the sea and handed the document back to the person in front of him. Don't we need to go to the sea? Seeing the things that Jiang Hai crossed out, the person here asked with some doubts. Go to the sea? Go to the sea in this weather? Unless we are crazy, the motorboat also has to be protected against the cold. Other than that, there are no problems. Are you crazy? It's only the beginning of April. How addictive would it be to go to the sea at the beginning of April? After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the person here was also stunned for a moment. Then, he smiled embarrassedly. They only thought about the advantages of their side, but they did not consider the current seawater. If they went to the sea, these tourists might not be able to withstand it. Although the sea would not freeze, and the temperature of the sea level was always above zero, it was basically about 7 or 8 degrees above zero. Ordinary people really couldn't withstand going to the sea unless they had done winter swimming before. Don't you need to get something special from Huaxia? You know, the tourists from Huaxia will also come to participate. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH-20 Clive couldn't help but think for a moment and ask him. There's no need. If they really want to see old Taoists and monks, they don't need to come to the United States to see it. They are here to see a celebration with American characteristics, so everything should be done according to our standards. Make it grand, and it's best to arrange for the police during the parade. I donate so much money to them every year, not for them to stay in the police station. When the time comes, they can come out to maintain law and order. Also, if they want to go to the stalls to sell snacks, they have to be registered. You should know better than me. Hearing SH-20 Clive's words, Jiang Hai shook his head and said, What a joke. Do the tourists from Huaxia come to the United States to see the dance? That kind of thing is everywhere in China. Do they need to come to the United States to see it? What they want to see is something with American characteristics, not something that can be seen everywhere in Huaxia. Of course, some people with a strong sense of national pride will be happy to see an old Taoist trick this group of Americans. However, if they sent it back to China, other than becoming a laughingstock, there seemed to be no other benefits. Most importantly, it was easy to make the old Taoist angry. If he came back to China to cheat money, who would bear the responsibility? Therefore, Jiang Hai directly passed on this idea. For tourists, it was enough to eat, drink, and have fun. Huaxia characteristics were not needed in Winthrop. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the staff nodded. Indeed, adding some Huaxia elements to the sea god ritual made them feel a little helpless. Now, that Jiang Hai said that they did not need to care about nationality and just treated them as ordinary tourists, it was much simpler. From this, it could be seen that Jiang Hai had a strong influence in Winthrop. After he finished speaking, it was as if he had made a decision. The 10 staff members had already taken their tablets and started to divide the work. Some of them were responsible for finding people to clean up the beach, while the others were responsible for getting licenses for people who wanted to set up stalls. In the United States, you had to pay taxes for everything you did. Naturally, roadside stalls also had to pay taxes. Therefore, in the United States, although there were many roadside stalls, 80% of them had licenses, just like ordinary restaurants. Of course, the taxes might be lower, but they were all taxed. Even if the police came, they would not be able to chase them away. In the United States, it was rare to see a scene like Huaxia. Once the city enforcement officers went out on the streets, it was like a scene of a mass exodus. Of course, the remaining 20% would also escape. There were also some people who contacted the police and set up routes and so on. Only Shinny Clive sat there and was responsible for the overall situation. It's about time. I'll treat everyone to a meal. After lunch, we can work in the afternoon. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai looked at the time. When he left, it was almost 10 o'clock. It took him half an hour to get here. He walked until the people studied the program for half an hour. He sat here for another half an hour. Unknowingly, it was already 11:30 in the afternoon. So, Jiang Hai coughed and said to the people in front of him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people also stopped what they were doing. Wow, it's already 11:30. Let's go eat, but Mr. Jiang, we can't let you treat us. Actually, our restaurant is very good. You can come and try it. A person sitting next to Jiang Hai looked at his watch, then smiled and said to Jiang Hai. In the United States, these so-called civil servants were rarely treated to meals. Basically, 90% of them went Dutch. This was because the anti-corruption law in the United States was very serious. Treating these civil servants to a meal was really not a trivial matter. Let's eat in our restaurant. Our restaurant here is very good. Hearing that Jiang Hai was rejected, SH-20 Clive was afraid that Jiang Hai would lose face. So after thinking for a while, he also said to Jiang Hai, "Okay." But obviously they thought too much. Jiang Hai just felt a little bored sitting here. He didn't mind eating. After deciding where to eat, Jiang Hai and the others went to the cafeteria in the town hall. Calling a cafeteria was a bit low. Although the meaning was the same, it was called a cafeteria in the United States. Americans paid a lot of attention to the taste of their restaurants. So, whether it was in universities, high schools, or even some government agencies, their restaurants were quite good. At least, they were not like the restaurants in some high-rise buildings in China. Take Jiang Hai, for example. When he was in university, he put 200 yuan into his card when he was a freshman. When he graduated in his senior year, he had 30 yuan left. He directly gave it to a junior. The food in the cafeteria was really hard to understand. Although it wasn't to the extent that eating a fly was a dish with meat, at least it was at the level of an Annie who could get whatever she wanted. The restaurants in high schools, universities, and government agencies in the United States basically maintained the nature of a buffet. It was free, and the food was also very good. Take Winthrop's Town Hall, for example. When Jiang Hai went over, he couldn't help but nod. At this time, he saw a lot of food in his line of sight. At this time, in his line of sight, there was a lot of food. At this time, there were meat pies, sausages, stewed meat, vegetables, salads, fruits, drinks, coffee, and so on. There was also bread, pasta, oatmeal, and dozens of other things. The selection was good, the environment was good, and there were a few televisions playing some sports or TV series. What do you want to eat? Get yourself. Seeing that Jiang Hai had finished looking at the restaurant, SH-20 Clive smiled and then elbowed Jiang Hai. Then, he brought Jiang Hai to the side where food was served. Bread, salads, and so on were all self-service. You could get it yourself. Meat dishes and so on were prepared by the chef. However, you could order any amount you wanted. For example, meat pies. If you only wanted meat pies today, you could take 10 of them, but you had to be able to finish them. If you wasted any, it would be deducted from your salary. Although Jiang Hai wasn't from the town hall, there were very few people in Winthrop who didn't know him. Naturally, these people didn't turn a blind eye to Jiang Hai's freeloading. The Americans weren't that particular. Looking at the food, Jiang Hai took 4 pieces of bread and 4 pieces of meat pies. These meat pies were made with minced beef. The taste was okay, but the texture was far from good. Minced beef like this was sold for $1 a pound in the United States. Of course, it was cheaper in the cafeteria. Otherwise, these people wouldn't be able to eat it so casually. In addition to the meat pies and bread, Jiang Hai also took some vegetables and sofas to sit at the table. There were ketchup, salad dressing, black pepper sauce, and so on the table. Using the plastic knife provided by the restaurant, Jiang Hai made 2 hamburgers with the ingredients in front of him and then ate happily. Seeing how Jiang Hai ate, SH-20 Clive couldn't help but laugh. If she didn't know Jiang Hai and someone told her that the person in front of her was a billionaire, she probably wouldn't believe it herself. This Jiang Hai was really confusing. What's wrong? After quickly devouring a hamburger, Jiang Hai licked the ketchup on his hand while looking at SH-20 Clive in front of him. He couldn't help but ask with some confusion. Nothing. Looking at his silly look, SH-20 Clive sighed. If time could go back to when they first met, maybe she wouldn't have taken him to Boston. If it wasn't for that episode, maybe their ending would be different. But the problem now was that time couldn't go back, so this was the only way. Chapter 1007. Welcome home. As Jiang Hai's car drove into the small courtyard, Jiang Hai also walked to the front of his villa. He didn't need to open the door. The door of the villa was already opened, and the voice of the cleaning lady sounded in his ear. Huh, someone's back? Walking into the door, Jiang Hai looked at the shoes on the shoe rack at the door. There was a pair of shoes stained with a lot of mud. And then he asked with some doubts. Yes, Miss Bridget Nelson has returned and is taking a bath. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the cleaning lady said mechanically. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was a little confused because it was only about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It should be busy at this time. What's going on? Is she on the second floor? Hearing the cleaning lady's words, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Yes, it's her room on the second floor. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the cleaning lady also replied seriously. Then Jiang Hai changed into slippers and slowly walked upstairs. When he walked to the door of her room upstairs, he found that Bridget Nelson had already taken a bath. At this time, the girl was standing in front of a mirror in her room, drying her hair with a hairdryer. He didn't know if it was to dry, so she only wore a slightly loose sweater, but the sweater couldn't show off her perfect figure. Those two straight, snow-white legs, slender waist, and a pair of indescribable breasts made Jiang Hai stiffen slightly to show his respect. Huh, you're back. Why are you sneaking around? You scared me. Maybe it was because Jiang Hai swallowed a little too loudly, which made Bridget Nelson notice Jiang Hai, and she couldn't help but blame him. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile a little awkwardly, then walked in from outside. Didn't you go to the town hall for a meeting? Why are you back now? Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Bridget didn't care. In fact, when this girl first came, she was very timid. She almost didn't even talk to Jiang Hai. The first time she was with Jiang Hai, it was Dinah Taylor who pushed her in. She was like a puppet the whole time. She didn't even know how to move. No matter how Jiang Hai positioned her, she would do whatever he told her to do. Usually, she didn't have much of a presence in the villa. But this little girl had become a completely different person. When she first came, Aphrodite was the oldest to earn money at 21 years old. Now she was already 24 years old. Dinah Taylor and Hilda Leonard were both 20 years old and 23 years old this year. Peggy Hall, Sheila Rodney, and Ohilia Clive were all 19 years old and 22 this year. And the youngest, Bridget and Janice Joy, were only 18 years old when they first came, and were now 21 years old. When they first came, they were dirty and thin, their hair was stuck together, there were some scars on their bodies, and their clothes were tattered. Because of long-term malnutrition, their faces were a little thin. To be honest, when Jiang Hai first brought them to the manor, he admitted that he was a saint because he really did not have any desire for them. They were dirty, smelly, and ugly. To be honest, if they were thrown on the set to act as ghosts or zombies, they basically did not need to put on makeup. However, after 3 years of living with Jiang Hai, the nourishment of the spiritual qi, the replenishment of the manor's food, and the changes in these girls, Jiang Hai could see it clearly. In the beginning, when they were with him, they could only be regarded as pretty. Out of 100, they could only score around 70. Now, they could score at least 85. This was a qualitative leap, because the girls in Jiang Hai's manor usually did not put on makeup, but because of the nourishment of the aura and Jiang Hai's hard work, their skin was quite good. They were basically in the best state. Their skin was white, tender, moist, tight, and shiny. Their hair was also very beautiful, and their faces were always full of smiles. This was their satisfaction with life. Their hearts were full, their lives were full, and with the nourishment of the aura here in Jiang Hai's manor, all the girls in Jiang Hai's manor could score more than 85 out of 100. If they put on makeup, it didn't need to be heavy. A very light kind was enough to make them the center of attention. However, they did not intend to be the center of attention. They were prepared to follow Jiang Hai for the rest of their lives. Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Bridget also pulled Jiang Hai to sit on the bed with one hand, and then she sat beside Jiang Hai. I just went to give a general direction. I'm not a person from the town hall. After lunch, I came back after a while. Why did you come back today? Looking at Bridget beside him, Jiang Hai asked her with a smile. Hey, don't mention it. I was unlucky today. I was going to drain the water, but there was a snake in the drain. I was so scared that I sat down in the drain and dirted my clothes. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bridget said helplessly. She was originally timid, so naturally, she couldn't help being scared. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at her with some surprise. Are you hurt? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at her wrists and ankles. No, it was a non-venomous coastal band snake. When I called, it attracted chirp, and it ate the snake directly. Seeing Jiang Hai staring at her, Bridget blushed and said with a smile. Obviously, she was very happy that Jiang Hai was so concerned about her. Even if Jiang Hai's concern was not only for her, she was also very happy. It's good that you're fine. Do you want to kill a round of snakes? Hearing that she was fine, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he was thinking about whether there were too many snakes in the manor now. Should he kill a round of snakes? No. I heard from Dulles Gerard and Robin Garcia that the snakes in our manor are basically non-venomous and harmless to humans, and most importantly, they can eliminate mice much better than cats. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bridget also said with a smile. Okay, then, Hearing Bridget's words, Jiang Hai also knew that snakes eat mice, and the effect is very good. Not only in the United States, but there are also many places in China that use snakes to kill mice. After this topic ended, Jiang Hai couldn't find any other topic for a while. As for Bridget, she just looked at him. Well, you should rest first. You were shocked. If you are tired, you can sleep for a while. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai was ready to leave. What he was most afraid of was that the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. He looked at Bridget Jiang Hai and said with a smile, "Then, won't you sleep with me?" Hearing that Jiang Hai was leaving, although Bridget was very timid, she had been Jiang Hai's woman for more than a year after all. They had done it hundreds of times during this time, so she was not so shy. She gently stretched out her hand, pulled Jiang Hai's little finger, and said with some hesitation. Looking at her hopeful eyes, Jiang Hai smiled. He was the least afraid of this situation. There was nothing to say at the moment. His body fell, and he pulled Bridget on her bed. The loose coat was quickly taken off, and Jiang Hai's clothes were also taken off. This is the second time I am alone with you. When the two met, Bridget couldn't help but smile and talk to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but blush. This matter was indeed not easy to talk about. However, Bridget didn't care. She kissed Jiang Hai directly. After the mouth, her tongue went all the way down, neck, chest, lower abdomen. When she was working hard, Jiang Hai also turned her upside down. Looking at some indescribable places like butterflies in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod with emotion. He didn't know if it was because of their talent, but the most likely reason was the aura. Although the girls in Jiang Hai's manor had fun with Jiang Hai every day, some of their indescribable places were like foreign educational films stored in the computer. "No, it's dirty there." Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Bridget whispered, "I'm using it myself. What's dirty about it? Didn't you just take a shower?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little dumbfounded. "That's dirty. I'll serve you. If you want to see, use your fingers." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bridget said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also used his fingers, but soon, he didn't want to use his fingers. He turned Bridget over. Sometimes a battle starts like this. More than an hour passed unknowingly. Jiang Hai also went downstairs, but when he went downstairs, he found that the other people were basically back, and then they looked at Jiang Hai with a smile, but Jiang Hai's face was so thick. He went straight to the kitchen, and while making trouble, he hugged Chia, who was cooking, and teased there. Remember to leave some food for Bridget later. Looking at Jiang Hai's heartless look, AI Xiaoxi couldn't help but smile and say, compared with Qi Jie and Qi AI Xiaoxi and Feng Yinshan were closer to the other people in Jiang Hai's manor. Looking at the current situation, AI Xiaoxi also knew that Bridget probably couldn't come down for dinner. Chapter 1008. On the second day after going to the town hall, Jiang Hai returned to his carefree state. The sea god ceremony was a week later, and it was their business to be busy. It had nothing to do with him. He didn't receive a salary from the town hall. Today's weather was good, so he moved the recliner to the tree in front of his villa. The tree in front of Jiang Hai's villa was originally a maple tree. It was there when he first arrived. In the United States, there were two types of trees that were particularly popular. One was the maple tree, and the other was the oak tree. In North America, there were about the same number of maple trees and oak trees. However, because Canada's national tree was the maple tree, the United States national tree was the oak tree. Basically, the two types of trees were about the same in both countries. The oak tree was most famous for its fruit. It was a kind of dried fruit. It was very delicious, but it wasn't very common in China. However, it was similar to pine seeds in the United States. It was cheap and delicious. And maple trees are maple syrup. This is something that everyone knows. But because maple trees produce maple syrup, they attract a lot of insects. When Jiang Hai was under the shade of a tree for the first time, he was eaten by a lot of insects. Therefore, he later brought some camphor seeds from China. This kind of thing couldn't be found in the United States. Therefore, Jiang Hai used his spiritual energy to produce camphor. This type of camphor was also planted in China to make mothballs or furniture. Therefore, it grew very quickly. In 2 years, it had grown to more than 3 meters tall last year. Therefore, before last winter, Jiang Hai moved the maple tree to another place. Although it was a big project, Jiang Hai definitely couldn't cut it down. In autumn, Jiang Hai still needed to collect maple syrup from this tree to drink. This year's spring, it was already about 5 meters tall. It was said that this tree could grow to 50 meters. Whether it was true or not, Jiang Hai didn't know, but at least he knew that this tree was very good. Because this tree didn't attract insects, the smell it emitted was very annoying. However, when people smelled it, it had a refreshing effect. After making a cup of Longjing tea, Jiang Hai lay down on the recliner. Then, he enjoyed the breeze, smelled the fragrance of the flowers, and swiped his phone while waiting for lunch. No matter what other people thought, Jiang Hai felt very good. Did he have any rigid needs? No. He lay here every day. According to the $7 billion he earned a year, 365 days a year, that was nearly $20 million a day. He didn't lack money, so it didn't matter how he squandered it. Because of the Dragon Ball and the spiritual energy, his physical fitness was particularly good. He didn't need to exercise, and his body was still as strong as an ox every day. He also didn't have the ambition to open up new territory or save mankind. His social status was also quite high. Not only did he cooperate with many countries, he was also a shareholder of Google. He had a company, money, and status. He really didn't have much to pursue. What did he pursue? To find excitement, to have fun in the car? He didn't like to play. To pick up girls? He had more than 20 in his manor, and he could pull every single one of them over and undress them in any position. Did he need to pick up those young models? There was no need. He really didn't want to play like that. Money, power, status, women. Jiang Hai had everything. What was there for him to strive for? Although only 3 years had passed, Jiang Hai felt as if he had entered a state of retirement in advance, because he really had nothing to do. But to be honest, his life was really good. At least, Jiang Hai really felt good. He lived like this every day, and he didn't get tired of it at all. The only thing he had to do was think about what position to use tonight, or what he wanted to eat. If there were any good movies or the like, he would go watch them with his girlfriends, go out to play, and buy clothes. He didn't lack money. Sometimes life was so boring, but it was good. If there was something that made him unhappy, it would probably be the children. There were so many women around Jiang Hai, but in 3 years, none of them had hit the lottery. Jiang Hai could only laugh at this. Jiang Hai glanced at his WeChat friend circle. Those who were showing off their children's existence. Jiang Hai curled his lips. He then closed WeChat and looked at Station 13's Ghost Beast. Recently, Jiang Hai has been very fond of looking at things. Hey boss, we have trouble. Just as Jiang Hai was browsing the screen, Knurse and Peters in the distance came over and said helplessly to Jiang Hai, Trouble? What's the situation? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai frowned. Could it be that someone couldn't stand his leisure and came to find trouble again? Looking at Knurse and Peters, Jiang Hai asked very seriously. It's rice. Rice has worms. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Knurse and Peters couldn't help but say with a horrified face, Ugh. For his words, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say other than ugh. Rice was definitely going to have worms. But then he thought about it. If there were worms, it would really be troublesome. Let's go and take a look. Hearing what Knurse and Peters said, Jiang Hai walked towards the rice field with teacup. Because Jiang Hai was still doing an experiment, the rice field he opened was not very big, only about 2 mu, about the same size as the tea tree. Although it was the first time he planted it, and it was not very straight and standard. After all, there was aura. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, in the winter, he could harvest almost 1,000 kilograms of rice. At least this number should be the minimum. After removing the shell, there's still about 800 kilograms. Of course, if they eat freely, it is definitely not enough for the people in Jiang Hai's manor. If they eat freely, according to the calculation of 1 gene per person per day, it will be more than 3,000 kilograms to eat. But this is the United States. Jiang Hai will still mainly eat meat and flour. Rice will be eaten 2 or 3 times a week. Jiang Hai doesn't care about this, and if the harvest is really good and the taste is good, he can plant more next year. But when he came to the rice field, he couldn't help but frown. Because at this time, there are a lot of worms on the water surface of the rice field. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a large area. Mosquitoes, water frogs, water scorpions, and so on. Jiang Hai looked at it. This is the world of worms. It rained a few days ago. It seems that these worms have all been rained out. In Huaxia, there's a special festival every year called tingling, which means that these worms will be startled out, and the rain the day before yesterday obviously made these guys start to reproduce in large numbers. In Jiang Hai's little insect exterminator, the chickens can't come over because this is a ditch, so he can only let these guys reproduce. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai can't help but scratch his head. It seems to be a little difficult. Boss, what should we do? Knurse and Peters scratched his head. He really doesn't know what to do. In fact, Jiang Hai was also a bit confused. In a situation like this in the country, the best way was to use medicine. However, Jiang Hai's rice was to be eaten by himself, so it was impossible for him to use medicine. If he didn't use medicine, then he could only use biological control. AI? Biological control? After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai suddenly patted his head, then picked up his mobile phone and looked it up. Soon, a method appeared in front of him. Fish farming in rice fields. Fish farming in rice fields is a very common method in Huaxia. Whether it is Jiang Hai's hometown or other places, fish farming in rice fields is very common. First, it is because the fish can eat the worms in a rice field, but it will not have any impact on the rice field. At most, it will eat some of the fallen rice to play the role of insect control. Second, because the fish in the rice field eat worms and rice to live, although its meat may not be as good as the wild fish, it is definitely much better than the fish in the fish pond. Other fish, a caddy of fish, may be sold for a few yuan, but rice flower fish may be sold for 12 or 20 yuan per caddy. Not only does it plant food, but it also raises fish. The fish feces also fatten the rice. It can be said that it is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Seeing this, Jiang Hai's eyebrows couldn't help but raise. When he dug this field, because he didn't know much about it, he would rather dig deeper with the principle of digging deeper. Now, it is in line with the initial plan of fish farming in rice fields. Now, it only needs to be modified a little. However, there's a problem with the fry. In China, the fry of sea fish may not be so easy to buy, but the fry of river fish is quite easy to buy. It can even be bought at some farmers' markets. But in the United States, no one eats river fish, they eat sea fish, so there is no market to sell the fry of river fish. But it doesn't matter if there is no market. Jiang Hai can catch it himself. Connor-son, let's dig here first, then go fishing. Once he thought of it, he must do it. Jiang Hai's character was like this. Usually, when there is nothing, he will be indifferent. Now that there is something, he will not delay it. Then, together with Knurse and Peters, he went to the warehouse, took out shovels and other things, and began to modify the rice field according to the standards of fish farming in rice fields described on the internet. Because there were only 2 acres of land, and because the 2 of them were born with great strength, after dinner and more than an hour of work, the transformation had already been completed. Once the water was released, the water level of the paddy field was still very ideal. But at night, when the lights are turned on, Jiang Hai and the others saw that there are more insects in the rice field. Regarding this, Jiang Hai can only think of solving the fish problem tomorrow. Sea fish is definitely not possible. Salt water can't grow food, so he can only get river fish. Fortunately, although Winthrop does not sell fry, there's a lot of wild fish here. Tomorrow, Jiang Hai was ready to go to the river to catch some fish. Of course, he couldn't use a fishing net directly, but he was still quite confident in his fishing skills. Don't forget, he was a person who could go to the river to catch wild fish. In Winthrop, it was not a problem. Chapter 1009. The next morning, Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters drove away. They drove straight to a relatively peaceful area near Winthrop, which was not far behind Winthrop High School. In the past, Jiang Hai liked to fish here, but at that time he was the only one who came here to fish. But today, when he came here, he found that there were more than a dozen people fishing on both sides of the river. Jiang Hai looked around and found that they were all Huaxia people. Basically, they were all uncles in their 40s or 50s. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over to fish, these uncles also glanced at him. Seeing that Jiang Hai knew how to park the car in an open space, they stopped looking at him. After Jiang Hai parked the car, he began to take things out of the car. First, it was a huge bag of fishing equipment. There were fishing rods, fishing lines, fishing hooks, and fishing floats. Some of these things were tied up, and some were prepared for use. Jiang Hai liked fishing, whether it was in the river or in the sea. He was very interested in fishing. Therefore, he has a lot of fishing equipment. He has 8 fishing rods, all of which are made of the best charcoal, and all of them are of various lengths. In this small river, there is no need for fishing rods, so Jiang Hai didn't bring any with him. In addition to these fishing equipment, there were also fish nets, which were also called fish households. There's also a special incubator because the fish that Jiang Hai caught were not for eating now, but to be taken back to raise. When he went back, there must be water. In addition, there were poles, umbrellas, and 2 small chairs. After everything was set up, Jiang Hai also took out his bait. Generally speaking, the bait used for fishing was some prepared dough like corn flour. But this kind of dough would easily melt in the water, especially in a constantly flowing river. Therefore, in such a river, one would use fake bait or live bait. Fake bait was not easy to catch fish, so Jiang Hai decided to use live bait. As for what it was, Jiang Hai would use live bait. Insects. There was nothing else in Jiang Hai's manner, but there were plenty of insects. His bait was some cabbage worms, earthworms, and clamworms. After everything was set up, Jiang Hai also picked up an earthworm, hung it on the hook, and then directly threw it into the water. He did not set up too many rods, because he knew that one was enough. Jiang Hai's manner was full of spiritual energy, so naturally these insects had some spiritual energy. After putting them into the water, they naturally attracted the attention of the fish. In the eyes of the masters in the distance, Jiang Hai lifted the rod less than a minute after Jiang Hai put it into the water, only saw 2 palm-sized crucian carps hanging on 2 small hooks. Wow, it's a 2-shot cannon. Looking at the 2 fish in front of him, Jiang Hai could not help but smile. Then he happily took the 2 fish down. Because Jiang Hai's fish were to be reared, he did not use barb hooks, so it was easy to take them down. After taking them down, he threw them into the net next to him and then continued to fish there. The fish on Winthrop's side were very stupid, because there were very few people fishing for them in the past, and the temptation of Jiang Hai's insects was too great. So even if some fish felt that something was wrong, they would still flock to him. Jiang Hai basically put the bait in the water, and sometimes it took him more than 10 seconds to catch a fish. The longest time was about 2 minutes. Sometimes it was 1 fish, sometimes it was 2. Because he used a short rod and was fishing for crucian carps, the speed was really fast. After sitting here for more than an hour, Jiang Hai had almost caught hundreds of crucian carps. There were 2 masters not far from him. Others could not see how many he had caught, but these 2 knew a little. So one of the masters could not sit still. After collecting the bait, he took the initiative to come to Jiang Hai's side to watch Jiang Hai fishing. "Young man, you're amazing. What bait did you use? Do you have a secret recipe?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the master here watched for a while and found that Jiang Hai had caught a lot more. He still could not hold back. When Jiang Hai caught 2 more crucian carps, he came over with a smile and asked Jiang Hai, "There's no secret recipe. I just used my own earthworms." Hearing the master's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the master could not help but scratch his head and look at the worms in Jiang Hai's box. "Your earthworms? You live in a small town?" The worms were all alive and fresh, which meant that they were not brought over from China. It could only be that Jiang Hai lived here. Yes, Jiang Hai did not reveal his identity, but just said with a smile, "Sai, I really envy you for being able to live here. To be honest, this is my first time here, but I've already fallen in love with this place. The air is fresh, the life is leisurely, the expenses are not high, and I have a lot of fun. I've already shortened the visa period from 1 week to 3 months. If I pass, I'll have to live here for at least 2 months before I feel at ease. It's because my family members are still in China, and I still have to collect my pension. Otherwise, I'd be prepared to buy a house here." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the master could not help but sigh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled and did not answer because there was no way to answer. If he said that it was true, then people would say that he was not patriotic. But if he said that this place was not good, he really couldn't say it. At least in the case of traveling, this place was indeed a good place for leisure travel. After chatting with the master for almost an hour, Jiang Hai also fished for the whole morning. Looking at the fish in the net, there were almost 300, so he was not in a hurry to fish. After telling the master, he took the things and threw them into the car. Then, he returned to his manor with Connerson Peters. Next, it was time to release the fish. But there were also rules when it came to releasing fish. Why were many of the fishes that were caught unable to survive after returning home? There were basically 3 reasons. First, it was related to the temperature difference and the oxygen content. But fortunately, the rice field that Jiang Hai wanted to release was originally water from the river, so there was no need to worry about this problem. Second, it was because of the trauma on the mouth, which was not so easy to recover. Naturally, the fish could not eat and had to die. Third, it was because of the difference in the original water quality. Jiang Hai tried his best to reduce these 3 points, so naturally, the problem was not big. But before putting them into the pond, Jiang Hai deliberately cleaned them one by one. This was because when fishes are frightened, they will produce a kind of mucus on their body. This mucus will affect the breathing of the fishes. Many fishes have suffocated to death because of this. So before Jiang Hai put the fish into the rice field, he washed them very quickly. In less than half an hour, they were all released. Then, Jiang Hai and the others went back to eat. But 300 crucian carps placed in 2 mu of rice field really could not make any waves, so Jiang Hai and the others still had to go back in the afternoon. After having a good lunch at home, Jiang Hai and the others went to the river again in the afternoon. When they came, Jiang Hai found that the master who chatted with him in the morning was still there. It seemed that he had eaten a bite around here for lunch. After all, this was Winthrop High School. Just like how there were many food stalls outside high schools and junior high schools in China, there were also some food stalls outside this high school. Seeing that Jiang Hai came again, he felt that fishing alone was boring, so he came to chat with Jiang Hai again. Fortunately, Jiang Hai did not care. His bait was very strong. No matter what kind of fish it was very difficult to resist. Not to mention that Jiang Hai was just talking. As long as Jiang Hai was not playing gongs and drums, it was fine. In the afternoon, Jiang Hai caught about 300 crucian carps and 50 small carps. There was no other way. There were so many fish in the river, and the big net was almost full. Looking at the sky, it was almost dark. Jiang Hai did not say much and prepared to leave. After all, he had to go back and clean these fish. But before leaving, Jiang Hai gave the rest of his bait to the master. The master chatted with him for the whole day. The bait could not last the night, so he gave it to the master to play with. After receiving Jiang Hai's bait, the master was very happy. After watching Jiang Hai leave, he sat directly on Jiang Hai's fishing position. He was not like Jiang Hai, who fished for the sake of rearing. He fished for the sake of playing and eating. Of course, the bigger the fish, the bigger it would be. So he directly changed to the longest 2-meter long rod. After hanging half of a clam's silkworm on it, he directly threw it into the water. After the clam's silkworm entered the water, it reacted in less than half a minute. The rod directly jumped into the water. Fortunately, the master was quick enough to pull the fishing rod. Unfortunately, even if he pulled the fishing rod, it was useless. The thing in the river was obviously much stronger than him. It did not give him a chance to gain a foothold at all. As soon as the master saw someone fall into the water, the people who were fishing nearby ran over to help. For a moment, the scene was chaotic. When the master came ashore, he saw a big carp about 1-2 meters in the distance. It jumped high on the surface of the water under the setting sun with his fishing rod, and then disappeared into the river with the fishing rod. Seeing this scene, everyone here, including the master, laughed. But they had to admit that Jiang Hai's bait was really good. At this time, Jiang Hai did not know that there would be such an episode after he left. At this time, he had already returned to the manor and began to play with his fish. Chapter 10:10. Jiang Hai's bait had a miraculous effect. This rumor quickly spread among the people in Winthrop who liked to fish. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not give them much of a chance. There was no other way. Jiang Hai's paddy field was small. According to the domestic standard, a hectare field could only hold 10,000 to 15,000 fish. That was to say, only 15 mu of land could hold these fish. And there were still fry fish. You still had to consider the problem of these fry fish dying. Jiang Hai now had a total of 2 mu of land, and the fish he placed were all adult fish. Naturally, it was impossible for him to place them like fry fish. Therefore, Jiang Hai only fished for a day and a half before returning. On the first day, he caught more than 700 fish. Among them, more than 600 were crucian carps and 100 small carps. The largest one was only a little more than 2 caddies. When placed in the paddy field, it did not look very big. However, the effect was quite good. The fish at night might not have eaten anything when placed in the paddy field, but after the fish at noon were placed in the paddy field, they began to hunt at night. The insects floating in the water were the perfect rations for the crucian carps. The next day, when Jiang Hai went to take a look, the insects that were originally floating in the water had almost disappeared by 1/10. Of course, the insects would continue to grow, but these things would be the best rations for these fish. The next morning, Jiang Hai went to fish again. However, this time, he did not only catch crucian carps and carps. He began to fish for grass roots. Grass roots were actually quite difficult to raise. In order to let these people adapt, Jiang Hai deliberately put a trace of spiritual energy in the bucket containing these fish to ensure that these fish would not die. Of course, it was impossible for Jiang Hai to catch any kind of fish. The fish did not listen to him. When fishing for crucian carps, it was easy to catch carps, not to mention grass carps. Therefore, there were basically all kinds of fish, but there were indeed a lot of grass roots. After catching about 200 miscellaneous fish, Jiang Hai left. However, when he left, naturally, the old man who was close to Jiang Hai for a long time yesterday took the remaining insects in Jiang Hai's hands with a smile. After Jiang Hai left, he could not wait to take out the sea rod that he specially prepared. This time, the old man was prepared to do it for real. Needless to say, this old man was really lucky. When he went back at night, although he was wet all over, he really had a good harvest. He harvested a total of 6 big fish. A 1-meter-long mirror carp was quite eye-catching. In the evening, he specially cooked it and had a good meal with a few acquaintances. Of course, Jiang Hai did not know about this. He just took his fish back to the manor. These fish included grass carps, silver carps, black carps, and 2 small catfish. Jiang Hai directly cleaned up these fish and threw them into the rice field. The effect was still very good. Basically, after resting for an afternoon, these fish began to look for food. On the third day, when Jiang Hai and Knurse and Peters went to look again, although there were still insects on the water surface, the number was obviously much less. Basically, there were only half or even 1/3 of the insects that they saw 3 days ago. Of course, Jiang Hai did not have to worry that these fish would eat all the insects. How fast insects hatched, everyone was very clear. Now that it was spring, the insects could not be eaten up, With the success of Jiang Hai's rice field fish farming, he did not have to worry about the insects and the rice field not being fertile. And most importantly, when the water was released in autumn, he estimated that he would harvest a large number of fish. At that time, he would be able to taste the river fish that he raised. Thinking about it, Jiang Hai could not help but smack his lips. After eating too much sea fish, it was not bad to eat river fish occasionally. Thinking about the sweet and sour fish, the braised fish, and the dried fried crucian carp, yes, at that time, he would be able to have a good meal. After solving this matter, Jiang Hai was in a state of decadence again. Mayor Wallace and Jiang Hai notified in advance that the sea god ceremony would be held in 3 days. At that time, Jiang Hai would go 1 day in advance and take a look. If there was anything wrong, they could also change it. During these 2 days, whether Jiang Hai was relaxed or not, it was not up to him. Just like that, Jiang Hai passed another 2 days in a drunken stupor. On this day, he finally did not stay at home because he had said that he would go and take a look. Jiang Hai's position in Winthrop did not need to be explained. Last year, Jiang Hai held the fish tank. This year, Mayor Wallace directly asked him to hold the fish tank from the beginning to the end. He only helped to hold the fish tank when it was time to take it. Jiang Hai did not have much to say about this. Although it was a little tiring, he could still endure this kind of work. Although the fish tank was prettier than the previous years, it was only about 5 kilograms, so it was not a big problem for him. Because the ceremony was tomorrow, Jiang Hai also saw this year's sacrifice, an Atlantic blue dragon. Jiang Hai had also introduced this thing before, so he did not say much about it here. This year's Atlantic blue dragon seemed to be quite big. He had to admit that the fishermen in Winthrop were quite good. One must know that this kind of sea slug was very rare. Now, it was also quite a popular pet internationally. This kind of creature basically only lived in the tropical waters, but it could sometimes be seen in Winthrop, especially in early spring, when this kind of creature would be swept up by the ocean currents. When this kind of creature was in the sea at 13 to 24 degrees, its appetite was quite strong. But if it was below 13 degrees or above 24 degrees, it would not eat anymore. In the sea, it basically lived on the reefs or rolled up into a ball and drifted with the waves. Although this kind of creature looked like a worm, it was an essential and beneficial creature in the sea because its main food was poisonous jellyfish and purple conch, which was similar to what sea turtles ate. Therefore, in Europe and North America, where animal protection organizations were rampant, this kind of creature was relatively common in summer. On the other hand, in Guiyang, which should have been more common, was already very rare. They were basically captured and kept as pets. In fact, it was impossible for this kind of creature to go extinct because this kind of creature was hermaphrodite. It could give birth to children by itself. With such a powerful talent, it was indeed not easy to exterminate it. Holding the glass tank, Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace, and Shinny Clive walked along the path that they were going to take tomorrow. Azalina and the others were not idle. What a joke! Jiang Hai came to the parade. What if he was in danger? There would be a lot of people tomorrow, so the girls who stayed at home for a while began to get busy. Surveillance of various locations, as well as the selection of police officers to protect Jiang Hai, and so on, everything was being prepared in an orderly manner. With everyone's discussion, they basically had a plan for tomorrow's situation. Then, another night passed. The next morning, Jiang Hai got up. To be honest, he usually didn't get up so early. But today, they did have something to do. At 6 o'clock in the morning, they all went out. At this time, Winthrop was just beginning to brighten. Jiang Hai and the others came to the square in the middle of the town. At this time, there were already many people in the square. There were tourists and locals. When they saw Jiang Hai, they all cheered. Of course, the one who cheered the loudest was Jiang Hai. If it weren't for Jiang Hai, this would still be a poor fishing village. As for the tourists, they were more or less confused because most of them didn't know Jiang Hai. Although they heard that there was a very rich Chinese here, there were still too few people who had seen Jiang Hai. Now, when they heard the locals cheering, they cheered and joined in the fun. Amidst the cheers, Jiang Hai also walked up to the high platform. At 7 o'clock, with the sound of 32 cannon salutes, This year's Poseidon Festival officially began. There were no performances, no speeches, and no beating around the bush. When the time came, Mayor Wallace announced the start of this year's Poseidon Festival and directly handed the glass jar to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also raised the glass jar with the blue dragon in it, then went down the stairs and walked towards their original route to the beach. Along the way, more and more townspeople and tourists joined the parade. In front of the parade, the band organized by Winthrop School and the children performing were constantly clearing the way. Jiang Hai and the others walked very slowly. The journey that was originally about an hour took them 4 hours to complete. At 11 o'clock in the morning, they arrived at the release platform by the beach. When Jiang Hai released the blue dragon back into the sea, all the locals cheered. This also meant that the Poseidon Festival had accepted their gift. This year, they would definitely have a good harvest. After releasing the blue dragon, the ceremony and parade actually ended. Then, the crowd gradually dispersed and walked towards the 3 areas that were already planned. Most of the locals went to the stall area because they would trade with each other, trade some old goods, and buy some small toys. Most of the tourists went to the gourmet area and the distant play area to play. Of course, some tourists went to the old goods stalls to see if they could buy anything that they liked. As mentioned earlier, it was very troublesome for Americans to deal with old goods. They couldn't just throw it away, casually. If they threw it to the garbage station, they would have to write a note or something. Therefore, they preferred to give these old goods directly to the homeless. However, there weren't many homeless people in Winthrop, so trading with each other was a good choice. After releasing the blue dragon, Jiang Hai wasn't in a hurry to go back. Instead, he went directly to the food stall. Although Jiang Hai's house had all kinds of delicious food, he was still very interested in the street snacks. Chapter 10-11. Americans, or to be exact, Westerners, had a terrifying obsession with food stalls. Of course, more than a quarter of the people who set up food stalls in the United States had their own jobs. They set up food stalls not to earn money, but to have fun and to pass the time. There were many delicious food trucks in the United States. The stall owners were lawyers or civil servants. While they had stable jobs, they were not short of money at all. The reason why they set up food stalls was to kill time, because they liked to cook and also to satisfy their vanity. However, because the Americans believed that there was no such thing as a free lunch in the world, no matter what the food stalls were for, they would sell them for money. Almost 80% of the food stalls had to pay taxes and were protected by the government. Not only were the Western vendors so supportive, but the Western media was also the same. For example, in Boston and New York, every year, the city's food stalls would be ranked in a highly credible magazine. Even Michelin would give the food stalls a star rating. Those high-end food stalls were even harder to rank than those Western restaurants. Of course, the prices were very affordable. The people in Winthrop were the same. Although they did not have high-end food stalls, the food stalls tasted good. Because of the increasing number of tourists, there were many food stalls in Winthrop. Some were opened by restaurant apprentices, some were opened by housewives, and some were opened by fishermen. But no matter who opened the stalls, they had to go to the town hall to register and pay taxes. Winthrop was very small, so naturally, no one could open a food stall without paying taxes. Even in Winthrop, there were some Chinese people who opened food stalls and sold dumplings. They were quite popular. Of course, there were even more today. When Jiang Hai and the others walked into the food stalls, at a glance, there were at least 30 food stalls. Some of them were trolleys, some were old cars, and some were even broken boats. There were almost no shops that were exactly the same. At a glance, there were also a variety of food. After all, Winthrop has been entertaining tourists for some time now. Therefore, they already have a general idea of the tastes and choices of the tourists. Jiang Hai also has some understanding of this. At a glance, these 30 or so stalls mainly sell 8 kinds of food. The first was corn pancakes, which were basically sold in Mexico. Of course, there were black and white people who sold them, not only Mexicans. The second was barbecue. There were many Middle Eastern immigrants in the United States. First, it was because the people there were very rich. Second, it was because there were wars all year round. It was not a very suitable place to live. So there were many Arabian barbecue, beef, mutton, chicken, etc. There was no pork here. Third, there were some dishes from India. For example, the meat and pancakes. They tasted pretty good too. In these kinds of fast food restaurants, when you were ordering, the boss would ask you if you wanted spicy food. You have to pay attention to that. If you can't handle spicy food, don't say yes. You can only say a little because India's chili was pretty good. The fourth was some South American food, such as Yazzie love bacon. It tasted very good after being fried or roasted. It was a delicacy that people who like to eat meat can't miss. 5 was American fast food, sandwiches, or hot dogs. He had to admit that these things tasted quite good, and the portions were huge. In China, an authentic hot dog, such as Baiwei, would cost more than 40 yuan because it was basically sold in half in China. In the United States, it was sold as a whole. There were large pieces of turkey, cheese, hot dogs, sausages, cream, lettuce, kale, carrots, and so on. There were vegetables, meat, and all kinds of things. Together with ketchup, salad dressing, and so on, it was more likely to be bigger than a whole hot dog in China. The price was about $3, and that was assuming that there were added ingredients. Normally, it would only be about $2. The sixth was egg tarts, cakes, and so on. These things are not only popular in China, but also in the United States and the Western world. Some small cakes were delicious and filling. They also sold some puffs and so on. It was quite good. Number 7 was the seafood stalls. As the saying goes, those who live near the mountains and those who live near the sea eat the sea. Since Winthrop was located by the sea, there was naturally a lot of seafood. The fishermen were good at cooking seafood, such as roasted oysters, scallops, fish, shrimp, and so on. Since they were absolutely fresh, they tasted pretty good. The 8th was dumplings. Yes, dumplings were eaten in China. However, in China, dumplings were usually eaten in restaurants or at home. But in the United States, dumplings were an out-and-out snack. Many Americans liked this food, and there were not many people in China who didn't like dumplings. Therefore, although this snack had not appeared in Winthrop for a long time, it was very popular. Jiang Hai looked around and saw many people in front of stalls. This was because the quality of the food made by the people here was good. Although the taste was not quite the same, at least they were not scammers. Therefore, in front of every stall, there were many customers waiting. Some were locals, but most of them were tourists. Regardless of whether they were locals or tourists, Jiang Hai could roughly guess where these people came from by the type of food stalls they were gathered in front of. For example, the people in front of the barbecue stall might be from the north. This was because there was a saying in Jiang Hai's hometown, "There is nothing that cannot be solved with a barbecue." If there is, then 2 barbecues will be enough. The people in front of some cake stalls should be tourists from the south. Of course, this was not absolute. If it was before the Indian and Mexican dishes, there should be more tourists from the Hunan and Sichuan provinces because the dishes were very spicy. Of course, these were all Jiang Hai's thoughts. If you really looked at it seriously, you would lose. Just as Jiang Hai was watching the bustling scene and was about to pick something to eat, he saw 2 familiar figures in front of stall. It was a 4-person stall, 1 man and 3 women. One of the men was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s. He was a typical white man with a beard and a big belly. However, his hands were not slow. He was running a seafood stall. The huge oysters were skillfully opened by him and then placed on the electric stove in front of him to roast them. On the other side, there was an iron plate. A middle-aged woman was roasting garlic, and there were 2 young women helping her. Jiang Hai did not know the middle-aged couple, but Jiang Hai was very familiar with the 2 young women, Shite Clive and Karma Cliff. Needless to say, they were their parents. At this time, some people had unknowingly gathered in front of the stall, but there weren't many people. This was because roasting oysters took a lot of time. Usually, they would roast oysters before selling them. Very few people would come here to watch. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai took the initiative to walk over. Seeing Jiang Hai walking over, Karma Cliff couldn't help but wave her hand happily, then motioned to Jiang Hai to sit down. Jiang Hai also came over and sat there, while Shite Clive looked to the side. "Hey, I saw you just now. You really have the temperament of a leader." Looking at Jiang Hai, Carmacliff said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed and touched his nose slightly awkwardly. Is this your stall? In order to ease the awkwardness, Jiang Hai glanced at the seafood over there and asked with some doubts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Carmacliff also said with a smile. Of course, our stall is the best in Winthrop. No, the best in Boston. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Carmacliff said with a proud face. Hearing what she said, the three people over there couldn't help but laugh. Well, don't brag about yourself. I have confidence that Winthrop is the best, but I don't dare to say Boston. Hello, Jiang, I know you. Come, what do you want to eat? At this time, the fat man walked over and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Whether it is because of Jiang Hai's status in Winthrop, or because Jiang Hai almost got together with SH-20 Clive, he knows Jiang Hai very well. And Jiang Hai also knows him a little. Although the two have never met, they have been friends for a long time. I'm not too sure. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at the menu over there and said with some confusion. What we sell here is basically roasted shellfish, mainly oysters and barnacles. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH-20 Clive's father pointed to the seafood soaked in water in the distance and said to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai glanced at it, then he was a little overwhelmed because he really didn't know what those things were. You're the owner of a fishery, don't you know these things? Seeing Jiang Hai's confused look, SH-20 Clive's father couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shrugged. He really didn't know. Come, let me introduce you. Seeing Jiang Hai say that he didn't know, SH-20 Clive's father also stood up with a smile. At this time, the electric oven in front of him was almost full of oysters, so he now has some time. Jiang Hai has always been interested in seafood, so he took the initiative to go over. Just like what SH-20 Clive's father said, he is a seafood seller. If he can't recognize all these things, then it will be ugly. Chapter 10-12. You should know what this is, right? Seeing that Jiang Hai had come over, Xanthi Clive's father picked up an ugly shellfish and placed it in front of Jiang Hai. He then looked at him with a smile. I know this. It's a gooseneck barnacle. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai nodded. He knew about this thing because he had a lot of these things in his fishery. To be honest, barnacles are very disgusting creatures. They were attached to big reefs. Well, other things would also attach to them, such as the backs of whales and some plastic bottles. As long as it was something, they would attach themselves to it. They were densely packed, which gave people goosebumps. It was very uncomfortable. Jiang Hai had a bit of trypophobia, so he was not interested in these things. Gooseneck barnacles were still barnacles. They were also disgustingly packed together. They were also called dog claw snails, which could be found in China. However, in Europe, it was considered a very good delicacy. Regardless of whether it was roasted, boiled, or even eaten raw, there were many fans. However, Jiang Hai didn't think much of this kind of thing. Whenever he thought about the appearance of this thing, he couldn't eat it. Hearing that Jiang Hai knew about them, SH-20 Clive's father smiled and pointed to something next to him. Are these oysters? Well, I really don't know much about oysters. Looking at his father's smile, Jiang Hai smiled awkwardly. He really did not know much about oysters. SH-20 Clive's father also smiled after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Oysters take up a lot of reefs. It doesn't matter if you don't know much about them. Come, let me introduce them to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH-20 Clive's father fished out an oyster with a big shell that looked like a scallop from the water. This is called high prestige oyster. It's from Ireland. It's a beginner oyster. In French cuisine, oysters are usually served with this kind of oyster. It tastes good and is a perfect match for wine. It's sold individually for $1.20. SH-20 Clive's father said seriously as he looked at the oyster in his hand. Jiang Hai also remembered this kind of oyster. Although he was not going to cultivate it now, he had to at least recognize it. This is Finny Clive oyster. It's from France. This kind of oyster has to survive in salty waters for at least 2 months, so it doesn't have any parasites. It's also the best choice to eat it raw. Also, this kind of oyster has a special characteristic. When it's cultivated, you can add some sweetness to it. It's very popular in Western restaurants all over the world. It's also the top oyster with the highest sales volume. It's priced at $1.90. Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, SH-20 Clive's father became interested and continued to introduce his oysters. This kind of oyster looked better than the previous one. This oyster is from the Jersey coast. It's grown in Normandy and is exclusively for the British royal family. Of course, the royal family also wants to sell this oyster. This kind of oyster is very soft, but it's also very crispy. It's the kind of oyster that is very soft when licked or bitten. But if you use too much force, the oyster will break and sweat will splatter. It tastes good and can make people addicted to it like eating potato chips. Of course, this kind of oyster is not as harmful as potato chips. The third kind of oyster was introduced by SH-20 Clive's father. It's a small oyster. To be honest, this kind of oyster was similar to the oysters Jiang Hai had in his hometown. Although Bing City was not near the sea, the seafood there was not expensive. Ordinary oysters were 1 yuan per oyster in the night market where they came from. The bigger oysters were 10 yuan per group, and there were 6 oysters in a group. It was really not very expensive. But here, these oysters were very expensive. Also, this is Girardot oyster. It's the king of oysters. It's from France and is recognized as the best oyster in the world. This oyster is sold for $5. After introducing this kind of oyster, SH-20 Clive's father picked up a big oyster and said proudly to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai had heard of this oyster before because most Western restaurants, especially French restaurants, had this kind of oyster. This kind of oyster could be eaten as a main course. This kind of oyster, the price of an ordinary one, was $3. In Western restaurants, the price of one was $10. Now, Cindy Clive's father was selling it for $5, which was very cheap. Therefore, the people around him were basically all foodies who knew the ropes. Otherwise, like the old Jiang Hai or his friends, in their hometown, oysters were sold for less than 2 RMB each. But here, they were selling oysters for 35 RMB. Why? You can become a god if you eat it. This was the difference in the sales of luxury ingredients. Then, Shandy Clive's father introduced Jiang Hai to the oyster production areas in the world, as well as their levels. There were 4 kinds of oysters that were recognized as the best. Among them, Vinci Daki or Vinci Clay was the best among the best. Japan's Kumamoto oysters, the biggest of the best, Varon oysters, and Girardot oysters were the best among the best. Of the 4 types of oysters, 3 were from France and 1 was from Japan. In recent years, the oysters in Australia seem to be a rising star, but for a real chef, the top seafood must live in the cold sea. Because the fish in the tropical sea grew too fast, the meat quality, whether in terms of firmness or sweetness, was worse than the seafood in the cold sea. It could be said that the fish in the cold sea in the north was quality, while the fish in the warm sea near the equator was quantity. Of course, this was not absolute because there were many precious fish that liked the warm sea and could not be found in the cold sea. Therefore, Jiang Hai and the other fishermen could only laugh at this. After introducing the oysters, Jiang Hai also ordered a few and tasted them. After waiting for a long time, the oysters were roasted. Then, Jiang Hai could not wait to taste them. There were many tourists who were not short of money and were also knowledgeable. Girardot oysters were sold in French restaurants for $10 per oyster, but that was the price in the US and Europe. In China, if you went to a French restaurant to eat the same oysters, if they were not scammed and were really imported from France alive, you should not even think about it. Now that there were $35 per oyster here, you should be able to eat until you are full. Even if it was $35, he would not be willing to eat it. Other oysters were sold for $10. He had to admit that SH-20 Clive's father's seafood tasted really good. He was worthy of being a French chef in the past. Even Jiang Hai secretly gave him a thumbs up. He was really good. After eating the oysters, Jiang Hai paid the money and then left. He went to other stalls and ate some rolls, skewers, and the like. After filling his stomach, he left the stall area contentedly. Then, he walked to the trading area. When he passed by the amusement area, he found that the tourists and the locals were really happy. Because it was still early spring, the sea was still very cold, so no one went swimming in the sea. However, there were many people who played water sports, such as motorcycles. Jianghai did not like to play on motorboats, nor did he like to ride motorcycles, so he just looked around. Then, he went straight to the trading area. Jianghai was still very familiar with the trading area. After all, he had been here a lot in the past few years. In the trading area, there were a lot of things for sale. There were all kinds of things from big cars, fishing boats, household appliances, wardrobes, and even small things like mobile phones, computers, bed sheets, and quilts. There were all kinds of things. It was really a wide variety. As long as you wanted to, you could look for it here. Except for your wife, you should be able to find everything else. Although Jianghai didn't lack anything, he still liked to wander around here. The trading volume here was quite good. As soon as Jianghai walked in, he saw a lot of people haggling over prices. Here, you could buy things with money or barter. There was no clear price. Everything depended on one's own guess. To be honest, there were a lot of things that were quite good. For example, after Jianghai came over, he saw many young tourists buying things they like here. Some game consoles, some skateboards, basketballs, and so on. There were also some middle-aged tourists who would buy some medals, coins, and even some bullets and gun barrels that could no longer be used. There were all kinds of things. Jianghai saw was quite lively. However, after a simple look, Jianghai did not find anything that he was interested in. Just as he was considering whether to go back to sleep, he saw a stall in the distance. There were many people around. Most of them were children, and some were adults. These people were all there with surprised faces. To be honest, Jianghai was also a little curious, so he walked over. However, when he walked here, he found a sign that said Stray Pet Center. With his height, Jianghai looked inside. Then he saw another person, Domenica Sessi. Perhaps no one remembered who she was, but when it came to this person's identity, it was estimated that everyone would have some impression. She was the little sister of the Stray Pet Center, but now she was the person in charge. At this time, there were many cages around her. There were cats and dogs in the cages. Today, she came to find owners for these guys. Of course, she was not selling pets, but recommending people to adopt. In the United States, there were no dog dealers who would sell dogs on the street. Chapter 10:13. What's wrong? The Stray Pet Center can't continue? Looking at Dominique Cece, Jianghai smiled, then squeezed into the crowd and said to her with a smile, but she only rolled her eyes in response. Huh! Jianghai smiled, then squeezed into the crowd. Your manner can't continue, but I won't stop either. My place is the only stray pet center in Winthrop, and it is supported by the Federation. Hearing Jianghai's words, Domenica Sessi couldn't help but raise her head proudly and say to Jianghai, Hee, then why are you giving away pets on the street? Jianghai listened to Dominica's words and squatted down, looking at the pets she prepared here. He has to admit that there are a lot of pets, and there are many kinds of pets. Jianghai glanced at them. In addition to the known cats and dogs, there are hamsters, parrots, some other birds, and even more expensive breeds such as chinchillas. Of course, many dogs were originally very expensive. This made Jianghai feel that these people are really generous. Hearing Jianghai's words, Dominica also squatted down. After all, the space in the pet center is limited. There are some old, disabled, and mentally ill pets. We will take care of them in their old age, but there are some pets in good physical condition, in the prime of life, or in young age. Maybe because they were abandoned or the owner died and moved away, we encourage the public to adopt some every year. It is to reduce our burden and make people like these small animals more. After Domenica Sessi finished speaking, she picked up a Labrador that looked young and rubbed its little head in her arms. This dog is also very close to people and always wants to lick her. Are there any requirements for adoption? Seeing that these dogs are really cute, some onlookers couldn't help but ask. One had to know that many of these tourists had brought along the elderly and children to play. These two kinds of people have very low resistance to cute things like puppies, kittens, and the most important thing is that adoption here is free. In China, a purebred Labrador is sold for at least a few thousand yuan. Although the people who come here to play are not short of this money, who will refuse a free lunch. Tourists can adopt, Only local people with stable income can adopt, sorry. But unfortunately, Dominica Sessi directly cut off the idea of these tourists. They are not dog dealers. After selling the dogs, no one cares about what happens to the dogs. They are stray pet centers. After these pets are sent out, they will schedule a home visit and ask about their living environment at home, whether they are loved, whether they are abused, etc. It is not right to say that they are dog fans. They should be pet fans. They don't like those things. Oh, hearing Dominica Sessi's words, many tourists softly said, oh. It seems that these pets can't be taken back, and the locals just watched and thought about it. To be honest, many locals don't like to raise these things because in the past, Winthrop was very poor. They didn't have the money to buy dog food, canned meat, and so on for these cats and dogs. It was troublesome for them to eat by themselves. Although dog food and canned meat are very cheap in the United States, it still costs US dollars. Yes, there's a common sense in the United States that is to buy canned meat when feeding pets. It is really extravagant. In the supermarket, a 1 kilogram can of minced meat costs $1. An adult dog needs to eat 2 boxes a day, which is $60 a month for canned meat. This doesn't include the cost of dog food. For the people of Winthrop in the past, it may be a burden, but now that the people of Winthrop have some money, it is not a problem for them to raise a dog. But they still have to think about it, because to some extent, it is like importing a pet. Jiang Hai ignored these people at this time. He was still looking there. After looking for a long time, he couldn't help but look at Dominica Sessi. Where is that bear? I still want to raise a bear to play with. Don't even think about it. That bear has hurt people. It can only live in the pet center for the rest of its life. It can't even enter the zoo. And most importantly, it is a protected animal under the Washington Convention. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dominica Sessi rolled her eyes at him, then said with a serious face, she will not break the law to help Jiang Hai get wild animals. TSK, don't talk about that useless thing. If protected animals are not allowed to be adopted, then what's the matter with that tortoise of yours? After Jiang Hai heard her words, he couldn't help but smile, then pointed to a cage at the bottom. The cage was particularly large, about 2 meters long and 2 meters wide. It was at the bottom, and inside the cage was a huge tortoise. The tortoise looked to be about 1 meter long. At this moment, it was very indifferently lying there and playing with the sand. Oh, you were talking about it. If you want to adopt it, you can also raise it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dominica Sessi also looked at the big tortoise and couldn't help but smile. Don't talk about useless things. Do you think I don't know? Elephant tortoises are protected animals, especially such a big one. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows, then said with a serious face, but Dominica only looked at him with disdain. You really don't know. Indeed, most elephant tortoises are protected species, but there are also non-protected species. Elephant tortoises are divided into small elephant tortoises and large elephant tortoises. Among them, there are 4 types of large elephant tortoises, 7 types of small elephant tortoises, and 1 type is extinct. Among them, the small yellow-legged elephant tortoise, the Indian star tortoise, and the Burmese star tortoise can all be artificially bred and are legal pets. Among the large elephant tortoises, the Ongloka elephant tortoise, Cicada tortoise, and the largest Galapagos elephant tortoise are all protected and are not allowed to be raised privately. But this little guy is the Arabella elephant tortoise, a level 2 protected animal. Not a protected animal. It can be bought through normal tax commercial sales. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dominica Sessi also introduced it to Jiang Hai eloquently. But to be honest, after listening to her for a long time, Jiang Hai almost didn't understand what she was talking about. He just knew that this elephant tortoise can be adopted, and it's not illegal. This made him a little interested. What does this thing eat? Looking at this big tortoise, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. It eats everything: vegetables, fruits, grass, meat, fish, whatever you have, it will eat. Shrugging, for Dominica Sessi, this thing is quite easy to raise except for taking up space. Then can I adopt it? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up. In his opinion, raising a tortoise seems to be a good idea. Of course, You could be our richest man here." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dominica Sessi smiled, and then said to Jiang Hai, "The next thing was much easier." After Jiang Hai filled in a form, under the envious eyes of everyone, he called Edward Anderson and the others who came to watch the fun and moved this big guy into an F-750 they drove here. Then Jiang Hai stopped shopping and gave his car key to Azalina and asked her to drive it back in the evening. Then he drove the F-750 back to the manor. In the manor, Jiang Hai's huge strength manifested. He moved this guy down by himself, then opened the iron cage and let this guy in. This Arabella tortoise is basically an adult, but it is only an adult because the average lifespan of this kind of tortoise can live up to 200 years. According to Dominica Sessi, this tortoise is 20 years old this year, which is about 10 years in human life. Its original owners were an old couple in Boston. The tortoise tortured the old man and the old woman away, and the children didn't want to raise it, so they sent it to the Stray Pet Center in Boston and then sent it here. However, although it is not an adult, it has lived for 20 years and has some wisdom. It knows that the grass outside is very good, so it slowly climbed out and began to eat the grass in front of Jiang Hai. After eating a few mouthfuls, it raised its head and looked at Jiang Hai curiously. It may not have an owner in its mind, but it knows that it is going to live with Jiang Hai. From today onwards, this is your home. I won't use a cage to encircle you. Now, I'll take you to see the location of your home. Jiang Hai looked at this guy, slowly stretched out his hand, and transferred some spiritual energy to it. Then, he held this huge tortoise and began to walk around his home. He doesn't know if it's because of the spiritual energy or because this tortoise is really smart. It didn't shrink into its shell, but it walked with Jiang Hai. It has been looking at where its home is and where it can play. After walking around, including the forest, Jiang Hai put it down. Looking at its reaction, it was clear that it was interested in the grassland and the surroundings of the freshwater river. This kind of tortoise usually lived in the forest. But now, there were 3 giant beasts in the forest. One must know that this tortoise was adopted, so Dominique and the others would definitely come to see it. If they saw the 3 giant beasts, then it would be troublesome. So Jiang Hai can only raise it in the house. Fortunately, it is also very interested in the camphor trees planted by Jiang Hai. You will be a member of the family in the future, but what is your name? Looking at the big tortoise that began to eat grass again after putting it down, Jiang Hai touched his chin and began to study it. His naming soul is stirring again. Chapter 10:14. Spring is the most comfortable day. It's neither cold nor hot. The breeze blew, bringing with it the scent of new grass and the fragrance of the earth, constantly reverberating in Jiang Hai's manor. At this time, Jiang Hai was also lying on his recliner. On the small table in front of him, there was an iPad playing a popular TV series called Ghost Blows Out the Light or something. To be honest, Jiang Hai has read some of the original novel before, but because it mainly described a story from more than 30 years ago, Jiang Hai's immersion was relatively poor, so he couldn't remember the plot clearly. But it's still good to watch the TV series now. This TV series was already broadcast in China, but because Jiang Hai doesn't like to watch TV series, he likes to watch them all in one go, including American TV series. That's why he's watching it now. While watching the TV series, he drank tea and enjoyed the breeze. Nothing is better than his current life. At least that's what he thinks. Unknowingly, 5 days have passed since the Poseidon Festival. At present, whether it's Winthrop or his manor, everything has already returned to normal. Some people are herding cows, some are fishing, some are planting grapes, some are planting vegetables, and some are relaxing. Jiang Hai is the only one who likes the current situation very much. I've salvaged a lot of sunken ships, but I've never seen an ancient tomb before, TSK. While watching the TV series in front of him, Jiang Hai muttered softly. But just as he was muttering, the Google glasses he was wearing vibrated. Incoming phone call, number. After the glasses vibrated, a projection appeared in front of Jiang Hai. There was a string of phone numbers and a photo. Jiang Hai knows this photo, it's Taraga. Didn't she go to school? Why is she calling me? Although a little puzzled, Jiang Hai still pressed the answer button. Hello, Taraga, what's the matter? After the phone was connected, Jiang Hai asked Taraga on the other side. Hey, Jiang, do you have time now? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga's voice also sounded on the other side. And then he said to Jiang Hai hesitantly. Jiang Hai also heard some crying for the other side of the phone. What's the situation? Hearing someone crying, Jiang Hai immediately sat up. Although nothing had happened between him and Taraga, don't forget that Taraga was living with him. He was extremely protective. Let our teacher talk to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga handed the phone to another person. Hello, is this Mr. Jiang? Hello, my name is Mary Jane. I'm Taraga's teacher. If you have time, can you come to school? Then a woman with a slightly steady voice said to Jiang Hai. Oh, hello, Miss Jane, what happened? For this teacher, Jiang Hai still has some impression. She's a female teacher in her 50s who has been teaching in Winthrop for more than 20 years. She is very respected in town and is also a strong candidate for the next principal of Mary Jane's school. Jiang Hai sent Taraga to high school. Without Jiang Hai saying anything, the school had to arrange the best class and teachers for her, so Jiang Hai was very relieved that Taraga was studying in the school. That Taraga beat someone in school, and he may have beaten someone a little hard. The other party's parents want to talk to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mary Jane also sighed helplessly and said to Jiang Hai, Okay, I'll be there right away. Hearing Mary Jane's words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and then sat up from the chair. After hanging up the phone, he went straight to the room to get the car keys. While he was at it, he kicked Little White, who was circling around Long Thigh. Long Thigh was the tortoise that Jiang Hai brought back. Jiang Hai's name was so domineering. In fact, he also named it according to Huaxia's habit. Huaxia people believed that what was lacking should be in the name. For example, Jiang Hai lacked the 5 elements, so he was called Hai. If the 5 elements lacked the 5 elements, then he was called Sharp. If the 5 elements lacked the 5 elements, then he was called Forest or Forest. If the 5 elements lacked the 5 elements, then he was called Yin or Yin. If the 5 elements lacked the 5 elements, then he was called Tuesday. This was why some people called it Run, and some called it Two. This tortoise's biggest characteristic was that its legs were very short, so it was called Long Legs. It was reasonable to hope that its legs were longer. Although it had only been here for less than 5 days, it was obviously used to Jiang Hai's home. There was nothing to be unaccustomed to. After it came, it was treated well. Jiang Hai planted fresh vegetables that had just grown. Jiang Hai had not eaten them yet, but it had eaten them first. There was pasture with spiritual energy, and the water was cold, underground spring water. At least it was much better to live here than in the stray pet center or the zoo. The only bad thing was that it might be alone, without a companion. As for Jiang Hai's home, the original creatures had different opinions about the tortoise's arrival. For example, the boss of Jiang Hai's land pets, Little Yellow, which was the green wolf mastiff, had an indifferent attitude. Ever since Chirpy could fly, it was basically impossible to see it during the day. Unless it was raining outside, no one would know where it went. However, it would always come back at night. Occasionally, it would bring some game, such as rabbits, for Jiang Hai and the others. Whitehair was the Greenland seal adopted by Jiang Hai. It had now grown a little bigger. Basically, Jiang Hai's swimming pool was its territory. Of course, in addition to it, the 2 guinea pigs that Jiang Hai gave to Delina and Marion had also grown a little. They played with Whitehair all day long. After Longlegs came, the most excited ones were probably Bucktooth and Xiaobai. As for Xiaobai, it was quite enthusiastic about it. Sometimes, Jiang Hai also wondered if the Caucasian's IQ was also a little low. Otherwise, why would it look so stupid? In line with the principle of kicking a dog that passes by, Jiang Hai kicked Xiaobai's butt and drove away from the manor. In Boston, Jiang Hai's safety could be guaranteed, let alone in Winthrop. Driving, Jiang Hai entered the town of Winthrop and soon arrived in front of Winthrop's high school. After parking the car in the parking position, Jiang Hai greeted the guard and walked into the high school. In Winthrop schools, whether it was elementary school, junior high school, or high school, Non-school staff were absolutely prohibited from entering. For example, when Jiang Hai went to Shinny Clive, he was also stopped by the guard outside for a while. The reason why Jiang Hai could enter was mainly because teacher Mary Jane had already greeted him. After entering the school, Jiang Hai walked straight to teacher Mary Jane's office. But when he was about to walk in, he found that the situation seemed to be a bit wrong. After walking in, he found that in this small office, there were many people standing at this time. There were both men and women. Basically, they were a pair of parents or a parent standing there comforting a girl or a boy. These people's faces were more or less bruised, and their school uniforms were also in a mess. Taraga was standing there alone at this time. Next to her were her two good friends, Pell Selzy and Bessie Oliver, who Jiang Hai had seen before. Next to them were their parents. The two girls were also a bit embarrassed at this time. Bessie Oliver's hair was messy, and there was a bruise on her face. As for Pell Selzy, well, it was hard to tell. Taraga at this time was like a brave warrior who had won a battle. She proudly raised her head and looked at the people over there. Until she saw Jiang Hai, she lowered her head. As for Mary Jane, who had been paying attention to her, when she saw her movements, she knew that Jiang Hai had come. So she turned her head and nodded to Jiang Hai with a smile. "Hello, Miss Jane. What's the situation here?" Seeing that he had been discovered, Jiang Hai also walked in generously. He looked at Mary Jane and the people over there with some doubts. When they saw Jiang Hai, many of the townspeople here obviously looked unfriendly, but some people smiled and nodded. It seemed that they still respected Jiang Hai very much. "Now that everyone is here, let the children say it." Seeing that Jiang Hai had also come, Mary Jane also spoke. "It's that bitch. She seduced George. George is Horace's boyfriend." As Mary Jane's voice fell, a white girl with a black eye who was beaten pointed angrily at Bessie Oliver over there. "Bah, who would like him? He took the initiative to come to me. You are slandering me." Bessie Oliver here was not polite. He pointed at the crowd over there and said loudly, and the boy's face was quite embarrassed. "You? George will like you. You are kidding. If you didn't use a cheap trick, he would go to you." Hearing Bessie Oliver's words, a tall girl screamed at this time. But at this time, she was the most miserable. Her face was gray, her hair was messy, there was blood under her nose, and there was an obvious palm print on her face. "That's right. Don't you see what my daughter looks like? What kind of trash are you? As long as this kid's eyes are not blind, will he give up my daughter for you? My poor daughter, being beaten up like this by these lowly people, this matter is not over." After the tall girl finished screaming, a middle-aged woman dressed very coquettishly next to her shook her chin proudly and said. Next to her was a middle-aged man with a bulging belly, looking at these people with an unfriendly face. Chapter 10:15. Wait, just now teacher Mary Jane said that it was for children, right? Are you a child? Are you in the same generation as them? Are you their classmate? You have been repeating for 40 years, classmate. Hearing the woman's words, Jiang Hai waved his hand, looked at the woman with a smile, and said unhappily. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga and the others couldn't help but want to laugh, and the woman's face turned blue because of Jiang Hai's words. She may have rarely heard such words. What kind of manners are you? Maybe she knew that there was indeed a problem with her interruption just now. The woman raised her head and said with a proud face, "Really, what kind of manners are you? You don't have any manners. You can continue." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also said disdainfully, and then said to the others. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman's face became more ugly. After being beaten up by Jiang Hai, these people looked at each other and didn't know what to say. But a few days ago, George Eddy found Bessie and said that he fell in love with her at first sight. He wanted to pursue her, but at that time, I asked her to help me pick tea leaves. Bessie knew that only girls who had never made friends with the opposite sex could help you pick tea leaves, so when she came back, she rejected him. But he didn't give up. When we were having lunch today, he came over to confess his love again. Later, Horace Clark and these girls came to the toilet to block us. We were in the middle of a fight when this guy came over and took sides. I couldn't stand it, so I beat him up too. Seeing that the scene suddenly became quiet, Taraga stood up and told Jiang Hai the situation. It's obvious that she seduced George. How did it become that George likes her? George and I are very close. Hearing Taraga's words, Horace Clark also said loudly, but just after she finished speaking, Jiang Hai waved his hand. I don't care who this Xiaobai likes. He likes whoever he likes. It has nothing to do with me. Did you block them? Who started it? Looking at these people, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. Sure enough, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people stopped talking. There are a total of 7 people in Horace Clark's group over there, plus George Eddy who tried to stop them. There are 8 of them, and Taraga's group has a total of 3 people. 3 people dare to fight against 8 people? No one is stupid. How can this be unrelated? George, tell me, did she seduce you? Hearing that Jiang Hai wanted to settle this matter so quickly, several girls couldn't stand it anymore. Horace Clark pulled the sleeve of George Eddy next to her and said loudly. George Eddy dodged a little, thought for a while, looked at Bei Shi again, and then nodded vigorously. You see, George said that she seduced him. What else do you have to say now? Seeing George Eddy nodding, Horace Clark also seemed to have won a victory and said loudly. Are you crazy, little girl? You didn't understand what I said just now. Even if it was Bessie who seduced this guy named George of yours, does that mean you can hit her? You've got your priorities wrong. Glancing at Horace Clark with a smile, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Horace Clark couldn't help but be speechless. Now it's my daughter who is beaten up. Look at this delicate little face. What is it now? My daughter is going to participate in a beauty contest. She has a bright future. If you beat her now, the United States may lose a big star, an excellent singer, and a supermodel in the future. Seeing that his daughter was speechless, her father couldn't help but stand up. There was no way. He knew that his wife was good at pestering, but she might not be the opponent of the man in front of her. So he had to stand up and explain. However, his superior words made Jiang Hai smile. Hey, you're really shameless. Okay, I beat your daughter, right? Okay, tell me, do you want to go to the judicial system or what? Looking at this guy, Jiang Hai said calmly, then signaled Taraga and the others not to worry. Letting them go to jail like this is too easy for them. Pay up. Seeing Jiang Hai say this, he thought that Jiang Hai gave in and said proudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Okay, how much do you want? Looking at this man, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. 100,000. After thinking about it, this man also opened his mouth and directly called out a number. Okay. Originally, he thought that he would ask for a sky-high price, but he didn't expect Jiang Hai to answer so straightforwardly. Seeing this, the man's wife couldn't help but gently pull his sleeve. Cough. I'm talking about medical expenses and mental damage compensation. Also 100,000. Seeing his wife pulling his sleeve, the man immediately changed his words and said with a serious face. 100,000 became 200,000. No problem, by the way. What do you do for a living? Hearing 200,000, Jiang Hai also nodded. No problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, several people here were a little moved, and the parents of the girls who were beaten were also a little moved. I'm an actuary supervisor. Hearing Jiang Hai ask about his job, the man said proudly. Okay, you want 200,000? Okay, I'll give it to you. An actuary's annual income is about $90,000. Since you're a supervisor, I'll double it for you. 180,000. Let's call it 200,000. I'll give you 200,000 now, equivalent to your annual income. Jiang Hai looked at this man and nodded. He directly took out a checkbook, wrote a check for $200,000, and handed it over. The man didn't hesitate and directly took it, then looked at his wife and daughter proudly. The parents of the other girls were now a little hesitant to stand up, but before they could stand up, Jiang Hai had already continued. I don't believe that when Taraga beat your child didn't fight back. Now my child is dizzy and can't raise her hand. This is a concussion. There's nothing to say. Your family's matter is settled. Now pay the money. Looking at the man in front of him, Jiang Hai said very calmly. As he spoke, he motioned for Taraga to do as he said. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga directly sat on the chair over there, rubbing his head and complaining that he was dizzy. As soon as they saw Taraga do this, the parents who wanted money instantly stopped and looked at the current situation. You scoundrel, you still want money? Hearing Jiang Hai directly take back the chess piece, the person who was very proud of himself couldn't help but tremble, and then he looked at Jiang Hai with a face of surprise. Jiang Hai sneered. Was his money so easy to take? Of course I want money. The children fought and hurt each other, and it was your child who started it first. I paid for your medical expenses, so you have to pay me back. We have to be reasonable, right? Otherwise, I'll go to the judicial system and let your girl stay in jail for a few years. Looking at this person, Jiang Hai said very calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the person couldn't help but be speechless. He couldn't really let his girl go to jail, could he? Fine, you win. He took out the check of $200,000 that he originally put in his pocket. He really was a little reluctant, but he knew that now wasn't the time to hesitate, so he directly threw it on the ground in front of Jiang Hai. Wait, this isn't enough. I like to be reasonable. I paid you a year's worth of income, and you took the money. Now, you have to pay me a year's worth of income, and we're even. However, Jiang Hai didn't have the leisure to pick up $200,000. He smiled and said slowly, was this matter so easy to solve? He was thinking too much. What do you do for a living? How much do you want? Hearing Jiang Hai say that $200,000 wasn't enough, the person's heart skipped a beat. Then, he raised his head and said angrily, I'm a farmer and cattle breeder. I have a manor in Winthrop, the Soaring Dragon Manor. I think a lot of people here know that I have this manor. You can go to the tax bureau to check. I didn't make a lot of money last year, $7 billion. I'm talking about dollars. Today, you take out $7 billion and slap it on the table, and we'll call it quits. If you can't, I'll sue your girl and make her go to jail. Believe me, I can take out $100 million to do this. I've done it before. Looking at the person's anger, Jiang Hai stood up with a chuckle. The more he spoke, the brighter his face became. When Jiang Hai finished, the face of the family in front of him was quite good. It was hard to find someone with such a pale face. The guy's daughter burst into tears. She was in high school, and she wasn't stupid. She knew what $7 billion meant. If what Jiang Hai said was true, she would really go to jail. Once she came out, her life would be ruined. The woman on the other side also looked at Jiang Hai in surprise, trembling all over. As for the man, he didn't know what to say. Now, his mind was blank, and he didn't know what to do at all. Do any of you want to pay compensation? Seeing that the family was about to go crazy from fear, Jiang Hai turned his head and looked at the other people in the distance and said indifferently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people smiled awkwardly, especially those who were greedy just now. Now, they were laughing very happily. This really saved them from being ruined. If no one wants to pay compensation, then we'll go. All right, remember, get $7 billion ready or wait for the court summons. Seeing that these people were so obedient, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He stood up and chuckled. Chapter 10:16. Mr. Jiang, please wait a moment. Just as Jiang Hai was about to leave the school with Taraga, teacher Mary Jane walked out from behind. Seeing Jiang Hai stop, she couldn't help but smile. Mr. Jiang, I wonder if you are dissatisfied with our school? Seeing Jiang Hai stop, Mary Jane looked at Jiang Hai and said very seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai scratched his head. Where did this come from? No, I'm quite satisfied with your school. Although something like this happened today, to be honest, Jiang Hai still appreciated the actions of this high school. After all, school violence was inevitable and existed everywhere. Jiang Hai was also bullied when he was in school and robbed of money. At first, he would fight with the robbers, but later, he realized that he couldn't beat them, so he chickened out. Not only the senior students, but there were also bad guys in his class. They said they were borrowing money, but in fact, they were robbing money. It was useless to tell this to the teacher or parents. If he told the teacher would at most come and give him a scolding. It wouldn't hurt or itch. Even if he went to his parents, it would be useless. If this kind of person could be controlled by his parents, then he wouldn't do this. As long as he had some family education, such a thing wouldn't happen. At that time, The school would at most issue a notice of criticism, stay in school for investigation, and so on. Basically, it was useless. Basically, the biggest possibility was that he would be expelled. However, these students had no choice but to study. It would be better if they were expelled. At that time, they would still come to the school every day. You can control the school inside, but can you control the outside? These people were all minors, who could do anything. And if you call the police, then you should prepare to transfer schools, because you would be isolated by the teachers and classmates in school. Because if you made a big deal out of it, it would be a disgrace to the school and a slap to the teacher's face. In the teacher's view, it didn't matter if you were bullied. This was called an internal conflict. If you called the police, then it would be a big deal. It was precisely because of the education problem in China that school violence was much more common in China. At most, it would be reduced to a small matter, and a small matter would be ignored. This was the reality. Of course, Zhang Hai didn't say that school violence didn't exist in the United States. Naturally, it existed in the United States, but because the management was quite strict, it was easier to control the incidents, especially for some college students and adult high school students. They could really go to jail, just like the popular abuse case in California a few years ago. The person who just watched from the side and handed a pair of scissors was sentenced to 6 years. The main culprit was directly sentenced to 13 years. In China, the saying "he was just a child" did not apply in the United States, especially in high schools and universities. If two male students fought one-on-one, there might not be any problems because they wouldn't talk about it. It was also embarrassing if they lost. But as long as it was a gang fight or a siege, the American police would never be soft-hearted when arresting people. Therefore, Zhang Hai was quite assured that Taraga would go to school here. Moreover, the situation in this school was better. Originally, this school had some reputation in the Boston area. No, it could be said that it was in the Massachusetts area. The teaching quality was quite good, although it couldn't be compared to some private schools. After all, the main students in this school were Winthrop residents. Originally, the school was a bit shabby, but there weren't many troublemakers. The admission rate every year was quite good. Maybe because it was in the Boston area, there were many people who were admitted to Harvard, Boston University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and other high-level universities in Winthrop High. The learning atmosphere was quite good. In the United States, it was basically the same as the current primary and junior high schools in China. It was divided into districts, but in the United States, it was very open. Even if you rented a house nearby, you could still go to school here. Originally, Winthrop High School's teaching quality was good, but the facilities were too poor, so parents were not willing to send their children to suffer here. But since Zhang Hai started to donate money and pay taxes, this school also received a lot of money. Last year alone, the town hall gave them $2 million to support education. Zhang Hai also donated a new library and new stadium, and the entire school was reorganized. In the summer of last year, Winthrop High School became the best public high school in Massachusetts in one fell swoop. It may be worse than some of the private high schools of the aristocracy, but among the public high schools, it was definitely the best. Therefore, the people who came to school were not only people from Winthrop, but also people who lived in the Boston area would send their children to school. The family just now should be for Boston. Otherwise, they would have recognized Zhang Hai. It's class time now. Miss Taraga isn't going to class. Where are you taking her? Looking at Zhang Hai, Mary Jane said with a smile. She knew that Zhang Hai was a big customer of the school and could not be offended. Oh, then you go to class first. Originally, Zhang Hai thought that after this incident, Taraga should not be allowed to go to class today. After all, when he fought with his classmates when he was young, his father would take him away directly after the fight. The tradition of the old Zhang family was that one would not be reprimanded for fighting. If one won, there would be a reward, and if one lost, they would go back to practice hard. Zhang Hai was like this when he was young. Okay. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Taraga also nodded, then walked towards the classroom. Mr. Zhang, I know you like Miss Taraga very much, but she may have some problems. Seeing Taraga's figure disappear, Mary Jane could not help but turn her head and say to Zhang Hai, just because of the fight? Hearing her words, Zhang Hai frowned. If she asked him to stay here just to talk about this, then he would have to reevaluate this school. It's not right to scold him for fighting on both sides. Of course not. Haven't you already dealt with the fight? I'm talking about Miss Taraga's inner problems. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mary Jane also said briskly, and then looked at Jiang Hai calmly. Inner problems? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai frowned. It's good that it's not about the fight, but what's wrong with her inner problems? Miss Taraga is a little too antisocial. She never participates in any class activities, parties, or clubs in the school. She only lives in her own small circle every day. When she came to school, I found this problem, but because I saw that she made 2 friends, but now she's still like this. Thinking about Taraga's problem, Mary Jane said with a helpless face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was also stunned. This isn't wrong? Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai asked very seriously. God knows how much effort his parents spent to make him become such a person when he was in high school. He cannot make friends, but he must go home after school. Playing basketball and playing on the computer will affect his studies and will become bad. If he participates in class activities, he will have to spend money. It's best if he doesn't participate. It'd save a lot of money at home. Although Jiang Hai didn't educate Taraga in this way, to be honest, he didn't think there was anything wrong with this. Of course that's not right. Children have to have a child side. They have to be lively, sunny, and know how to communicate with others. In the future, when they go to college or enter society, they naturally need to talk with others, not be a yes man. They have to have their own independent thoughts. You can't let her practice these things after she enters society. She has to have a certain amount of contact when she's in school. Hearing Jiang Hai's matter-of-fact words, Mary Jane was stunned and said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smacked his teeth. The education methods of the United States and Huaxia are completely different. Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed, but his sixth sense told him that he was in the United States now, so he should listen to the other party. What should I do? However, on the surface of embarrassment, Jiang Hai quickly pressed it down and asked teacher Mary Jane seriously. You should think of a way to have a heart-to-heart talk with her or cultivate her self-confidence. The reason why she's like this now is very likely because she has just come into contact with this society. You should let her see more things and cultivate her to walk out of the small circle in her heart. Seeing that although Jiang Hai didn't understand, he was still willing to ask her how to do it, Mary Jane also sighed. She told Jiang Hai the method. As for how Jiang Hai would do it, she didn't know. Cultivate self-confidence. Okay, I know this. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. Cultivate self-confidence. Well, he couldn't help but think of a group of people in his mind. If he wants to cultivate self-confidence, this method may be the best. After talking with teacher Mary Jane for a while, Jiang Hai walked to his car, then picked up his phone and dialed number. Not long after, a bright voice came from the other end of the phone. Hey, why did you think of calling me? It's really strange that you would take the initiative to contact me. Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai also smiled. The owner of this voice has a close relationship with him. Stop talking nonsense. I didn't call you the night before yesterday. Listening to the voice on the phone, Jiang Hai said very indifferently. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the person on the other side also chuckled. Well, you haven't called me for 37 hours. Well, tell me what's the matter. I'm still practicing my dance. You won't call me at this time. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the person on the other side also laughed and said. Chapter 10:17. Jiang, where are we going? Sitting in the passenger seat of Jiang Hai's battle shield, Taraga asked with some confusion. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He looked at her sitting next to him and said, To New York. I'll take you out to play. What's so fun about New York? Haven't we been there many times? Although Jiang Hai was usually a homebody, he occasionally wanted to go out to play. He was tired of Boston, so he naturally went to New York many times. Even if it wasn't 30 times, it was at least 25 times. It's different this time. It's mainly to take you there. Okay, don't ask. You'll know when we get there, Jiang Hai said with a smile as he casually messed up Taraga's hair. Then, he sped up and rushed to New York. Ever since teacher Mary Jane and Jiang Hai said that Taraga was a little self-abased, a little unconfident, and a little insecure, Jiang Hai also thought about it. This was indeed a problem. Although such a child was very popular with parents in China, it was not a good thing to have no personality, low self-esteem, and strong aggressiveness in the United States. However, when it came to developing self-confidence, to be honest, Jiang Hai himself couldn't do it. It was said that aristocrats had to be rich for more than 3 generations to be called aristocrats, because the aura of aristocracy couldn't be imitated by ordinary people. Jiang Hai was not an aristocrat. Strictly speaking, he was a homebody nouveau riche. The things he considered were still the thoughts of a small farmer and his private thoughts. He didn't have much of a view of the overall situation. The only thing he thought about was how to live comfortably and how to be happy. He didn't think about things like the country, the regime, the nation, and the human race at all. Although he made $7 billion a year, his current thoughts were the same as those of a worker who made $70,000 a year. He didn't care about race, righteousness, or any other nonsense. He just wanted to buy whatever he wanted and eat whatever he wanted. Of course, this was also quite in line with the position of an otaku. He didn't care about race or righteousness at all. This was also the reason why he didn't go public, save his money in the bank, invest in a company, go to other places to buy land, play in real estate, and make friends with the rich and powerful. It was because he didn't want to go this way at all. Worrying about the country and the people had nothing to do with him. He didn't have such great sentiments, so naturally, he didn't have such great ideas. Jiang Hai himself was a loser. You couldn't expect him to teach Taraga to have a confident, noble temperament. Therefore, he specially found a teacher for Taraga. The car drove very fast on the highway. After a few hours, they left Massachusetts. The outline of the world's largest city, New York, gradually appeared in the distance. Compared with the narrowness of Boston, New York, at least on the surface, looked a lot more magnificent. As the highway drove into the city of New York, the original speed gradually slowed down. New York, the world's largest city, naturally had its gorgeous side. The traffic flow was quite large, which was also one of the characteristics of this place. The car kept moving, but the speed just couldn't keep up. Even if it was 10 o'clock on Saturday, no one went to work, and there was no work. These were the people who came out to play. After entering the city, Jiang Hai drove for almost an hour before he arrived at the agreed place. The car just stopped, and he saw a girl wearing a baseball cap trotting over in the distance. Looking at her, Jiang Hai also signaled Taraga to get out of the car with his eyes, and he opened the door and walked in. "Jiang, you're finally here." The petite girl jumped into Jiang Hai's arms and gave him a French kiss without saying anything. Although this was the extremely open United States, this also attracted a lot of attention. Okay, calm down." Patting the butt of the short girl in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the girl also jumped down. At most, she was a little more than 6 meters tall. Next to Jiang Hai, she was really petite. At the same time, she was also curiously looking at Taraga, who came with Jiang Hai. "This must be Taraga." "Hello, I'm Selena Gomez. Nice to meet you." After seeing Taraga, the girl greeted him with a smile and shook hands with Taraga. After Taraga saw this person clearly, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. Selena Gomez may not have any reputation in China. The people who know her only know about her and Justin Bieber. After all, Justin Bieber talked about these things every day. However, in the entertainment industry of the United States, she is definitely a small star at the level of an A-list star. She had debuted in television dramas. Later, when she moved to the big screen, she had also been singing. Although she did not win any major awards like the Grammys or the Oscars, she had won countless small awards, especially the Teen Choice Awards. It was not an exaggeration to say that she had swept through them every year. Her main audience is junior high school students, and college students. After entering society, they may not have any feelings for her. Taraga is a high school student. Even if she doesn't chase stars, she knows there is such a person. But she never knew that this guy had an affair with Jiang Hai. To be exact, it may be more than an affair. Hello, nice to meet you. Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Taraga also said with some embarrassment, let's go and eat first. I know a very good Italian restaurant. Looking at her timid look, Selena Gomez couldn't help laughing, and then led Jiang Hai and the others to the distance. Let's go. Looking at the silly Tarag, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Then he led Tarag to the front, turning left and right. Not long after, Jiang Hai and the others came to an Italian restaurant. This restaurant wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. The most important thing was that each seat had a small partition. This way, it wouldn't affect other people, and it could also protect privacy. Obviously, many people who didn't want others to know would come here to eat. Selena Gomez is obviously a regular here. After walking in, a waiter took her and Jiang Hai to a table by the window, but you can't see inside from outside the window. After sitting down, Jiang Hai also looked at the menu. When it comes to Italian cuisine, the first thing that comes to mind is pizza, then pasta. Indeed, speaking of Italian cuisine, it really doesn't give people much impression, but in fact, the mother of Western cuisine is Italian cuisine, not French cuisine. Many French dishes are transplanted from Italian cuisine. After all, don't forget that the predecessor of Italy was the Roman Empire. This guy ruled a lot of Europe. Therefore, Italian roast beef slices, seafood, meat plates, and so on in the Western world are not worse than French cuisine. Jiang Hai and the others came here to eat Italian cuisine. Naturally, it is impossible for them to eat pizza or cheese. For these female stars, cheese is a huge burden, so their staple food is pasta, spaghetti made with meat sauce, plus steak, barbecue plate, salad, and so on. It is also a rich meal, at least Jiang Hai likes to eat it. Americans don't like to talk about things while eating, so they just eat. After the meal, they eat dessert, which is the famous Italian tiramisu, and then they start to chat. Jiang also told me about your situation. Let's go for a walk in the afternoon. Looking at Taraga, Selena Gomez said to her with a smile. But after hearing her words, Taraga looked at Jiang Hai. She doesn't know whether this is reliable or not. Jiang Hai shrugged at her. When it comes to cultivating self-confidence, he still believes in Selena Gomez. Who is Selena Gomez? She is an artist. No matter what kind of actor or actress, it is very important to cultivate self-confidence. For example, when acting, if you're acting as a daughter of a rich family or a rich person, you have to act like that. It is not like in China, where you can attract a lot of fans even if you don't have any expression. This is not possible in the United States. At least there are very few people who can completely rely on their face to make a living. Can you tell me what you want to do? Under Taraga's gaze, Jiang Hai is ready to explore her bottom line. Do you know how to improve a man's self-confidence? Looking at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez asked him with a smile. I don't know. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai himself is not a very confident person, so he shook his head. Power, status, fame, money, women, these things can improve a man's self-confidence and make him the focus of the attention. You're also a successful person, you don't know? Looking at Jiang Hai shaking his head, Selena Gomez can't help but smile. She likes Jiang Hai's silly feeling because she thinks he's really cute. Okay. After thinking about it carefully, Selena Gomez is actually right. How can a man be confident? It is to make others envious and jealous. High position, holding great power, money, and beautiful women. If all these are in the hands of a man, then this man will indeed be quite confident. Although Jiang Hai is not a person who is born to be confident, his words are indeed more firm now than a few years ago. A few years ago, not to mention a person representing a country, even a section chief can suppress him to smile. But now, a country's representative has to look at his face to buy meat and grass. Thinking about it this way, it is indeed a reflection of self-confidence. Seeing Jiang Hai nod in agreement, Selena Gomez looked at Taraga again. Chapter 10:18. Then how do you make a girl confident? Selena Gomez continued to ask while looking at Taraga. Money, power, status, fame, man. Taraga said with some confusion when she heard Selena Gomez's words. She really didn't know much about these things. Selena Gomez also laughed when she heard her words. You're so despicable. You're right, but you're also wrong. As the old saying goes, knowledge is fate, and knowledge is to serve money. Money is indeed the foundation. As for power, status, and fame, I can't teach you these. Maybe Walton can. As for men, at least it's not something you need to consider right now, Selena Gomez said with a smile as she looked at Taraga. Money, I have money, Taraga said hesitantly after thinking for a moment. Indeed, she was a little rich woman. The money that Jiang Hai usually gave her, including the money that Jiang Hai gave her after they found the gold. Taraga now had at least $2 million in her bank card. In fact, it wasn't just her. Every woman around Jiang Hai had at least money in their bank cards. Apart from Walton, Selena Gomez, and Qi Li, the ones with the most money were Qi Jia and Qi Ya. The two of them had shares of the Qi Group and shares of Jiang Hai's Tinglong Company. Their net worth was at least $1 billion. In terms of cash alone, there was almost $10 million in their bank cards. Feng Yinxin and AI Xiaoxi definitely had a lot of money too. Feng Yinxin had more than $5 million, and AI Xiaoxi had at least $4 million. Azalina and the others all had shares of the Tinglong Company and money from Jiang Hai. Their net worth was at least hundreds of millions. At the same time, they had no less than $6 or $7 million in cash, and at least $3 or $4 million. Among them, the ones with less cash were probably Valentina and the others who stayed in the company. After all, they came into contact with society and usually bought more things. People like Azalina and Galina were purely saving money. Jiang Hai naturally wouldn't treat Aphrodite and the others badly. Although they didn't have any shares, having 3 or 4 million yuan wasn't a problem. Moreover, they didn't have anywhere to spend it. At most, they could only buy some makeup products and new clothes. Delina and Marian were Jiang Hai's daughters in name, so naturally, they wouldn't be short of money. They had about $10 million in cash. Jiang Hai often gave them $200,000 or $300,000 to buy clothes and jewelry. But basically, they didn't buy jewelry, and the clothes were cheap, so they basically saved the money. Taraga actually didn't have much money here. It was her fault for coming so late. It could be said that if the women in Jiang Hai's manor pooled their money together, it wouldn't be a problem for them to come up with $100 million in cash. This was just their pocket money, so they really didn't lack money. As for Walton, Selena Gomez, and Qi Li, needless to say, Qi Li and Walton were businessmen. Although they weren't as rich as Jiang Hai, they were definitely quite rich. Selena Gomez, being a star in the United States, was indeed more profitable, but it was also more tiring. Since she had a relationship with Jiang Hai, then Jiang Hai wouldn't let her be too tired. Although Jiang Hai wasn't a good person, he was still good to his women. Although he didn't directly give Selena Gomez money, he also had other ways. For example, Selena Gomez also released 2 CDs 2 years ago. He also bought 1 million CDs. Each CD was about $8, which was 16 million. Then he gave these CDs to the poor for free. After tax and the distribution company's share of the 16 million, Selena Gomez would have about 5 million left in her hands. So after knowing that Jiang Hai supported her, Selena Gomez was also very considerate to Jiang Hai. At the same time, she didn't lack money. This could be seen from the fact that she didn't release any CDs last year, and the frequency of her concerts was quite low. Hearing Taraga's words, Selena Gomez smiled and said seriously, "If the money is in the bank, then the money is not yours but the bank's, so the first step for us to develop confidence is to spend money." Spend money? Hearing what she said, Taraga couldn't help but hesitate, because she was a little reluctant to spend money. "Okay, have you finished eating? Let's go." Seeing that Taraga was still a little confused, Selena Gomez also smiled, and then the three of them left the restaurant together. Of course, the money for the meal and the tip were indispensable. After getting in the car, Jiang Hai and the others went directly to Fifth Avenue. Under the command of Selena Gomez, they stopped in front of a Versace brand store. Then she turned her head and looked at Taraga behind her. "This is a Bluetooth headset. After you put it on, I will tell you what to do." Looking at Taraga with a smile, Selena Gomez said, and Taraga was stunned when he heard what she said. "You want me to go down by myself?" Looking at Selena Gomez in disbelief, Taraga looked at Jiang Hai for help until she nodded. However, Jiang Hai said that Selena Gomez was in charge of today's matters, so he could only express that he had no choice. Looking at the appearance of these two, Taraga sighed helplessly, then slowly opened the door and walked out. Seeing her action, Selena Gomez smiled and waved her hand, then rolled up the window again. "I miss it so much." Just as Taraga slowly moved toward the Versace store, Selena Gomez had already rushed to Jiang Hai's body. After whispering, she quickly untied Jiang Hai's pants. "Hey, we are on the street now." Looking at the anxious girl beside him, Jiang Hai was also a little flustered. "What are you afraid of? I am a public figure. I don't care. You just stay here." Rolling her eyes at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez lowered her head. Jiang Hai also licked his lips, relaxed his body, and looked at the people passing by outside the window. "Miss, is there anything I can do for you?" At this time, Taraga, who was outside, finally walked to the door of the store. The waiter of the store, although looking at Taraga's civilian clothes, did not drive her away. Instead, he opened the door and asked her. In fact, in the eyes of these people, Taraga was not a potential customer. Listening to this person's words, Taraga said with some hesitation. She really didn't know what to say. She just glanced at the things in this store, and they were really expensive. "Tell her to take out your new spring collection." Although she was busy, Selena Gomez did not forget her duty and spoke to Taraga through the Bluetooth headset. I am here to buy things. Take out your new spring collection this year." Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Taraga also had some confidence. Although she still stuttered, she still spoke to the person in front of her. Oh, okay, this way, please." Hearing what Taraga said, the waiter here couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, but her good professionalism still made her lead Taraga into the store in doubt. Then she signaled a few waiters to come over and take out this year's new women's clothing. Looking at these things in front of her, Taraga was a little confused. "Try them one by one. Unless you hate a certain style very much, try them all." Listening to the voice in the headset, Selena Gomez also said a sentence. After hearing her words, Taraga was also desperate. She braced herself, gritted her teeth, and walked into the fitting room. At this time, Selena Gomez outside was no longer satisfied with just swallowing and vomiting. She pulled the tab under Jiang Hai's chair and moved Jiang Hai's chair to the largest position. At the same time, she laid down. Then she directly crossed the middle partition and came to Jiang Hai's side. I can't stand it. Hurry up." When Jiang Hai finally couldn't stand it and ended, Taraga on the other side had also finished trying all the clothes she saw. Half an hour had passed unknowingly, and Taraga didn't know what to do next. "Say, wrap up all the clothes I have tried, and then take out the bank card." Listening to Taraga's request for help, although Selena Gomez was tired and panting, she still told her what to say very calmly. Taraga also did as she said. When Taraga's voice fell, the good attitude of the originally good waitresses increased by another octave. She didn't buy shoes because she was used to wearing sneakers, but she bought a few bags because she had seen them in school before. Those girls would have some handbags or handbags. Anyway, she spent money, so she didn't care how much she spent. Moreover, Jiang Hai said that the things she bought today were all his, and he would reimburse her. She didn't buy shoes because she was used to wearing sneakers, but she bought a few bags because she had seen them in school before. Those girls would have some handbags or handbags. Anyway, she spent money, so she didn't care how much she spent. Besides, Jiang Hai said that the things she bought today were all his, and he would reimburse her. After walking around, the waitresses behind Taraga walked out of Versace with more than 20 bags. Chapter 1019. How was it? Did it feel good? Seeing her come back, Selena Gomez smiled and opened the car door. She helped her throw the clothes and bags into the car and then asked her, It's okay, but these things cost more than $300,000. After hearing Selena Gomez's words, Tarag hesitated for a moment and said with some hesitation. She was now thinking about how much beef and ordinary clothes they would need to buy for $300,000. How long would it be enough for their tribe to survive? TSK. These rich people were really wasting resources. Hey, this is nothing. Let's continue. Let's go to Estee Lauder over there. Hearing her words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but laugh. Then she proudly pulled her and walked away. She wouldn't let Taraga get in the car because the smell in the car hadn't dissipated yet. She was a very careful girl. The appearance of a successful woman was composed of several parts. Beautiful clothes, perfect jewelry, exquisite makeup, and a beautiful hairstyle. These were the standard equipment of a confident woman. Now that there were clothes, Selena Gomez was ready to prepare other things for Taraga. Makeup was a very important point. If it was makeup products, many people who had some understanding of luxury makeup product would say that since Jiang Hai didn't lack money, why didn't he buy the legendary Chanel No. 5? Chanel No. 5 had a great reputation in the world. As for what kind of reputation it had, Jiang Hai didn't explain it here. There was nothing much to say. Just find an encyclopedia, and there would be a detailed explanation. But those who had really been to the United States would know that although Chanel's makeup products and perfume had a certain sales volume in the United States, the real #1 luxury brand in the United States was Estee Lauder. This brand was originally an American brand. Although the United States wouldn't be like Japan and South Korea, where the quality of their products was the same, they would naturally support their own brands. The products sold by Estee Lauder in the United States weren't worse than Chanel. Moreover, they had more benefits and discounts. Therefore, in the upper class of the United States, many people liked to buy Estee Lauder's makeup products. Now, Selena Gomez took Taraga to a nearby Estee Lauder. After about 2 hours, they came out. According to Selena Gomez, they tried a total of 3 types of makeup. Taraga was obviously more suitable for fruit makeup. After putting on foundation, drawing eyebrow lines, and brushing eyelashes, Taraga looked more beautiful than before. However, Jiang Hai didn't care too much about it. After choosing the makeup products, it was time to buy jewelry. For example, these people weren't too picky about the materials, because at that price, the materials must be the best. They were more interested in the brands, such as Cartier, Tiffany, and Bulgari. These are the top 3 brands. The same things were sold here were much more expensive. For example, a diamond bracelet might be sold for $100,000 in some stores, but it would be sold for $10 million here. They were selling the brand and design. Jiang Hai didn't care about these things the most. However, the girls were very interested in these things. But Selena Gomez didn't take Taraga to these places. Instead, they went to Swarovski. At this time, some people would say that they had heard of this brand, but not many people knew about this brand. According to Selena Gomez, this brand's products were all fake. Yes, even if it was real Swarovski products, they were all fake. For example, the diamonds were all fake because they were selling fake products. Their original intention was to imitate crystal products. The most famous thing here was the rhinestones, which were artificial diamonds. They were quite cheap. At the same time, this wasn't a luxury brand, just an ordinary business. They sold designs, nothing more. Therefore, if a woman saw her boyfriend buying a Swarovski product for her, she would directly throw it at his face because it was similar to scolding him. Of course, it wasn't a problem to buy some small accessories, such as some watches, pendants, and so on. Selena Gomez was only 25 years old this year. She was a girl in 1992. Although she was a little older than Taraga, she also knew what accessories girls at Taraga's age wanted. There was no need for things like diamond necklaces, rings, and so on. Instead, some small accessories on the belt, bracelets, and so on were enough to shine. Therefore, buying these things cost a total of $10,000. Then there was the most time-consuming thing, hair. Women were very particular about starting from scratch. When they moved to a new house, they had to change their hairstyle. When they changed their job, they had to change their hairstyle. When a relationship ended, they had to change their hairstyle. When something happened at home, they had to change their hairstyle. When they gave birth to a child, they had to change their hairstyle. They always had a reason to go to the hairdresser. So women really liked to do their hair. In Jiang Hai's opinion, there were a total of 4 hairstyles: short hair, braids, single ponytail, double ponytail, long hair, and curly hair. Yes, there were only these few hairstyles, but in the eyes of women, there might be thousands of hairstyles. It was difficult to understand after buying these things. Selena Gomez directly took Jiang Hai and Taraga to a hairdresser where she specialized in styling. Well, it seemed to be called a styling studio now. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't want to go in, but Selena Gomez forced him to go in. After watching Selena Gomez talk with a sissy for a while, the sissy took Jiang Hai to wash his hair. After wiping it clean, he went behind Jiang Hai and unconsciously touched Jiang Hai's hair with his hands. "Oh dear, your hair is really good. I want to have hair like this, but unfortunately, when I was young, I permed my hair and damaged it. It's really annoying." As soon as this guy opened his mouth, Jiang Hai felt a chill from the bottom of his feet to his heart in an instant. "Just cut it shorter for me." "Okay, it's neat. Also, don't talk anymore." Jiang Hai had this hairstyle since he was 5 years old. He had never cut or blow-dried his hair. He also never did anything unusual. He had always had the same hairstyle. "Tisk, it's really boring." "Then let's watch the music video." After hearing Jiang Hai's words, this sissy twitched his mouth and picked up his scissors. At the same time, he turned on a small TV beside him. Jiang Hai was also a cheap person. Cutting hair was very boring. So, he wanted to watch what was on the TV. When the music started, he could only say that it was okay. It was a Soviet-Russian song. Jiang Hai's family lived in Bing City, and since he was young, he had listened to Moscow's outskirts at night. He was not against Soviet-Russian songs. At the same time, the TV was showing a small wooden house in a snowy area. There was an introduction of the song. The song was called Zonhop. Well, Jiang Hai's English was really not good. "What the hell is this?" After watching for less than 20 seconds, Jiang Hai could not take it anymore. He felt like he was going to puke out his lungs. "How can you say it's a ghost? It's really annoying." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the guy who cut his hair could not help but punch him. Then he winked at him. Jiang Hai really wanted to vomit now. "Turn it off for me," and then change the haircut. Rubbing his forehead, Jiang Hai swore that he would never let this guy touch his head again. It was too disgusting. There was no other way. A straight guy like him really could not bear this kind of thing. TCH. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the sissy raised his head and left without saying anything. After a while, Selena Gomez came in with a punk. Fortunately, although this punk was quite cruel to himself, he still perfectly fulfilled Jiang Hai's requirements. Only Selena Gomez was there holding back her laughter. "Okay, what are you laughing at? What kind of place are you looking for?" Rolling his eyes at her, Jiang Hai said with a look of displeasure. Okay, Kevin is the best image designer here. You can't enjoy this blessing." "Haha, by the way, don't leave tonight. I just received a call. Demi is having a party tonight. Let's go and join in the fun." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez said to Jiang Hai, "I don't like to go to parties." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's brows wrinkled. What he said was the truth. He really didn't like to go there. He didn't like to go to places that were too loud. It would make his mind tense up and uncomfortable. "It's a theme party. It won't be too noisy. Please, don't tell me you don't even want to stay for one night." Looking at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez put her hands together and looked at Jiang Hai with a pitiful face. Thinking about how he usually spent too little time with Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai could not refuse her. He could only nod helplessly, hoping that it would not be too noisy. Chapter 10:20. Yeah. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile and wave her little fist. "Let's do the hair here first, then go to eat, and then go to my house. After sending Taraga back, I will change my clothes, and we will go." Selena Gomez might really like parties. Seeing that Jiang Hai had agreed, she smiled and said, "Let's go." Looking at her, Jiang Hai always felt that he had fallen into a trap. After a while, Taraga appeared in front of Jiang Hai with her new hairstyle. Taraga's previous hairstyle was basically long black hair or a ponytail. In Jiang Hai's opinion, this was enough. But now, although it was still long black hair, it was not too straight. At the end of the hair, they made it look like an inside button. It really looked better, but Jiang Hai didn't know why. After designing Taraga's hairstyle, Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez, and Taraga went to have dinner together. Dinner was French food. Because Selena Gomez had been thinking about the party, she ate quickly. Then, because Taraga was still underage, Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez went back to Selena Gomez's villa in New York with her. After arranging a room for Taraga, they told her where the bathroom was, where the kitchen was, and there were many ready-to-eat things in the kitchen. If she was hungry, she could eat them directly. What was the Wi-Fi in the house, how to watch the TV. After everything was done, Selena Gomez pulled Jiang Hai into her room. Hurry up, take off your clothes. As soon as they entered the room, Selena Gomez took off her clothes directly. Didn't you say you were going to a party? What are you doing? Seeing that Selena Gomez quickly took off the clothes on her upper body, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her with some doubts. Do I have to do it again before leaving? Today is a themed party. Do you know that it's a costume party? Everyone has to dress up as the characters in the anime. While talking to Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez had already taken off all her clothes. She stood in front of her wardrobe naked. After opening the wardrobe, she saw that there was a special door inside that was filled with anime cosplay costumes. Looking at the wardrobe full of costumes, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. This is a bit too much, but I don't have those clothes. Let's forget about it. Seeing that she took out more than a dozen clothes at once and threw them on the bed, then began to pick them up, Jiang Hai used to be a pure otaku, so he naturally watched a lot of anime and movies. Now, many of the clothes on Selena Gomez's bed were from anime and movies, such as Sailor Moon, Cat Girl, Clown Girl, Wisteria Girl, and so on. Wonder Woman's costume looked too low now. In addition, there were some costumes from games such as Resident Evil, Chun-Li, and Ollie from LOL, which have been popular in recent years, and so on. There was a mess of everything. After she took them out, she kept gesturing there. And this is okay. There are clothes for people who don't have clothes to change into. You can choose after you go there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez said with a smile while trying. Finally, she picked a bounty hunter Miss Misfortune's costume in LOL and put on directly. To be honest, Selena Gomez was very seductive. Now that she was cosplaying, Jiang Hai couldn't help but get hard again to show his respect. How is it? Does it look good? While talking, Selena Gomez moved her exposed waist. It looks good, but it's too revealing. What if your belt falls off? Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. If it was just when they were together, Jiang Hai would be very happy with her dress like this. But he can't be the only man to go to a party, right? Letting others take advantage of her. Even if it was just a look, Jiang Hai would be unhappy. TSK. You can even be jealous. What about this one? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Selena Gomez despised Jiang Hai, the smile on her face couldn't be hidden. When a man was jealous of a woman, it meant that the man cared about the woman. Therefore, Selena Gomez's heart was also sweet. So she took the initiative to change her clothes and then picked up another set of clothes. It was still the set of clothes of the bounty hunter Miss Misfortune in LOL, but it was the set of clothes of the Empress. Although there was still a lot of skin above the cleavage, the other parts were more or less covered. It was more like a set of pirate clothes. Jiang Hai glanced at the other clothes. This set was relatively less revealing, so he nodded. Then Selena Gomez smiled and left with Jiang Hai. The two of them drove in New York City, turning left and right. Not long after, they arrived at a small street in Manhattan. Although the street was not wide, there were many luxury cars parked here at this time. This was the place where the female stars and socialites gathered. Originally, Jiang Hai also wanted to park here, but Selena Gomez didn't let him park here. This was because in some bars, naturally there were security guards to prevent reporters from entering, but outside, there were no restrictions. So she still led Jiang Hai to the back door. After getting out of the car with Jiang Hai, they walked there. There were 8 big men standing at the back door. Naturally, they knew Selena Gomez. When they saw her coming, they nodded. Although they looked at Jiang Hai with some doubts, they didn't stop Selena Gomez from bringing him here. They followed behind Selena Gomez, and Jiang Hai also walked in with her. Walking into the nightclub, Jiang Hai heard some music and some screams, but as Selena Gomez said, the music wasn't too loud. At least in this place, Jiang Hai could still reluctantly accept it. I'll take you to change your clothes. Hearing the music, Selena Gomez also swayed to the rhythm, but she didn't go directly. After saying something to Jiang Hai, she took Jiang Hai to a nearby room where they could change their clothes. When Jiang Hai walked in, he saw many sets of clothes hanging on the wall. There was also a wardrobe and some changing rooms next to it. Everyone had their own space, and there was no need to distinguish between men and women. When Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez walked in, there were many people changing their clothes in the room. There were men and women, and they were all dressed differently. When they felt someone push the door open, the people in the room also looked over. "Hi, Selena." Seeing the two people coming in, the people in the room smiled and said. One of the women trotted over and excitedly held Selena Gomez's hand. "The two of us really thought of the same thing. Look, I'm also a bounty hunter," the woman said to Selena Gomez while showing off her figure. But compared to Selena Gomez, who dressed more conservatively because of Jiang Hai's influence, she dressed much more wildly. Indeed, this skin was originally called Western Cowboy in the game. "Wow, you dare to show off your small waist. Don't you have thighs and heels? Aren't you afraid of being posted online?" Looking at this person, Selena Gomez also smiled and said to the woman. Hearing her words, the woman couldn't help but pout. "Who cares about that? By the way, who's this? I've never seen you before." At this time, she also saw Jiang Hai, who came in with Selena Gomez and couldn't help but ask with some doubts. "This is my boyfriend, Jiang Hai. This is my friend, Ashley Glynn." She played Twilight. Hearing her words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile and said, "Hi. Hello. My name is Ashley Glynn. You can call me Ashley." Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Ashley Glynn was a little surprised, then took the initiative to stretch out her hand and shook Jiang Hai's hand. But just as Jiang Hai was about to let go, she scratched Jiang Hai's palm, which was a little awkward. "Hey, what are you doing?" Seeing Ashley Glynn's action, Selena Gomez couldn't help but frown and say, Sorry, I'm used to it. You guys pick first, I'm going out." Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Ashley Glynn also laughed and then walked out of the room first, leaving Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez behind. It was really a little awkward. "I should have squeezed you dry before coming. I was so busy playing that I forgot there were so many little sluts here." Seeing that Ashley Glynn had left, Selena Gomez could not help but curl her lips as she whispered to Ashley Glynn, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not such a casual person." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his nose awkwardly. What else can he say now? In fact, if she's willing to leave, Jiang Hai would like to go back and try to see what she likes to do when she wears those clothes, but obviously she won't leave so easily. "Forget it, I'll keep an eye on you in a while. Come on, pick something you like, let's go out and have fun." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez shook her head, then pulled Jiang Hai to the hanger next to her and picked up carefully. Jiang Hai also looked at these clothes and couldn't help but touch his chin. "Won't it be shameful to wear these clothes?" Chapter 10:21. To be honest, there are really a lot of clothes in front of Jiang Hai now, basically all kinds of models, all kinds of styles, everything. But he hasn't made up his mind on what to wear. His heart is really in a dilemma. The cosplay ball that Selena Gomez and the others are going to is naturally not as low class as the others. Although the costumes were not branded, the workmanship was probably better than that of the costumes at the Comic-Con. The United States is a country that likes to watch anime very much. For example, the most popular movie series in the world, Marvel movies, is based on American anime, and the sales of each issue has always been high in the United States. As everyone knows, there are two major animation giants in the United States. One is Marvel, and the other is DC. Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, Thor, and so on belong to Marvel, and Superman, Batman, the Joker, the Flash, and so on belong to DC. These characters can be regarded as the idols of Americans since childhood. But to be honest, it may be because of cultural differences. These tights that look very handsome in the United States, Jiang Hai can't accept them. They look very low class. At least from Jiang Hai's point of view, what Superman, what Batman, and the like wearing those clothes it was so humiliating. Fortunately, in addition to the anime in the United States, Japanese anime still has a large audience in the United States. No matter how good the domestic sales are in the United States, when it comes to Japanese anime, the first one is Dragon Ball. The influence and sales of Dragon Ball in the United States have always been the highest. It is far from being comparable to the current One Piece, Naruto, and Shinigami. So in front of Shanghai, in addition to the clothes from Marvel and DC, there are also some clothes from Dragon Ball. For example, Goku's martial arts suit, Vegeta's battle suit, and so on, but the battle suit is also very shameful. I'll wear this. After looking around and picking up a martial arts suit from Dragon Ball, Shanghai said to Selena Gomez, but after Selena Gomez looked at Shanghai, she shook her head. This won't do. It's too old-fashioned. You can try this. After hanging up the clothes in Shanghai's hands, Selena Gomez picked out a Superman suit for Shanghai. Although it wasn't the old one, but the new one, Shanghai still shook his head like a rattle drum. What a joke. He didn't want to wear such a thing. Then there is really nothing to wear here. Hearing Shanghai's words, Selena Gomez also rummaged for clothes. Just as she was rummaging, Shanghai suddenly saw a set of clothes. Wow, Selena is here? After a while, Shanghai and Selena Gomez slowly walked out of the room. However, with Selena Gomez in front and Shanghai behind, to be honest, he was still not used to it. Let's go. Looking at Shanghai, who had been following behind her, Selena Gomez also smiled and took the initiative to pull him out. As soon as Shanghai came out, he really attracted a lot of people, especially the attention of women. Shanghai's clothes were locked in the cabinet provided by the people here. At this time, Selena Gomez was still in the set of clothes she wore when she came, and Shanghai also changed into white trousers with a black belt. He wore a coat that exposed his chest like a cloak with red sleeves, a black cape, and a hat with bird feathers on his head. If someone familiar with One Piece was here, they would recognize this outfit. It was the outfit of the world's #1 swordsman in One Piece, Hawkeye, Jork or Mihawk. Compared with those tights, Shanghai didn't care about exposing his chest. Shanghai was 196 meters and 115 kilograms, but he didn't look fat. Why? It was because his muscles were extremely dense. Looking at Shanghai's exposed 10-pack abs, as well as his full chest, mermaid belt, male dog waist, and the Kirin arm supporting his clothes, Shanghai attracted a lot of attention as soon as he came out. Who is the person beside Selena? Looking at Shanghai's figure, many women's eyes lit up. Some people had even asked about Shanghai's situation, and some people even took the initiative to come over. That's Shanghai, Selena's boyfriend. His body is really good, but unfortunately, he is Asian. His size isn't very good. After hearing these people's words, Ashley Glynn, who Shanghai had just met, whispered in her small circle. Hearing her words, many women around her burst into laughter. I like Asians. They are more interesting and gentle than those guys. Don't you think it's fun to stuff that size into your mouth? At this time, another woman also whispered with a smile, causing these people to laugh again. Let's go. But at this time, Selena Gomez and Shanghai couldn't hear this. They came in, but the music didn't stop. She took Shanghai to a booth next to her and asked the waiter to bring some drinks. She sat there and talked with Shanghai, of course. She also introduced the people outside. And Shanghai also found that his eyes were not enough. The people who would attend this event could be said to be rich and noble. Basically, they were all in the entertainment industry. No matter which country's entertainment industry it was, there were some requirements for appearance. So it can be said that the people who came here today were all handsome men and beautiful women, especially some female stars who were wearing quite skimpy clothes. Originally, Shanghai thought that dressing like Ashley Glynn just now was the limit, but then he found that he was thinking too much. The people here were really wearing all kinds of clothes. Some female stars even only wore underwear, fluffy, with a small tail behind, containing rabbits, cats, and little devils. Looking at this exciting scene, some parts of Shanghai's body couldn't help but harden shamefully, so he unnaturally put his legs together to block. However, His model was indeed a bit scary. It didn't block that well, and his pants were a bit tight. "Hey, Selena, you're late." Just as Jiang Hai wanted to relax and take a deep breath, a fragrant wind suddenly came, and then a woman in a tight leather jacket came in from outside. Although this woman was wearing a tight leather jacket, the zipper on the front was pulled low enough. Almost all the balls were exposed except for 2 points. "Are you faking it, Black Widow?" Seeing this person come in, Selena Gomez didn't stand up but looked at her curiously. Seeing that Selena Gomez guessed right, this person also made a shooting gesture. "Hey, Jiang, this is Demi Lovato, my good friend." Today's lying down was also done by her. "Demi, this is Jiang, my boyfriend." After a simple exchange, Selena Gomez introduced Jiang Hai. "Oh, hello, my name is Jiang Hai. It's nice to meet you." Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Jiang Hai also stood up and took the initiative to shake her hand. "Hello, Mr. Jiang, nice to meet you too. I wonder if I can borrow Selena? There are many sisters waiting for her over there." After shaking hands with Jiang Hai, Demi Lovato said with a smile, "Of course." With a nod, Jiang Hai made a gesture of invitation. Demi Lovato and Selena Gomez ran to a bar in the distance. At this time, there were many girls gathered there. Seeing Selena Gomez coming over, they all laughed and chatted together. Jiang Hai also sat in place, drinking a drink while looking at the people outside. Just as he was looking here, Ashley Glynn, whom he met once, walked over with a smile. "Hey, handsome, aren't you going to dance?" Leaning against the door frame of the booth, the woman said with a smile, "I don't like noisy environments." Hearing the woman's words, Jiang Hai shook his head. He was telling the truth. "Wow, there are many young people who don't like parties nowadays. Do you mind if I sit here for a while?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ashley Glynn said with a smile, "Go ahead." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also motioned her to do as she pleases. Although he didn't know the purpose of this woman coming here, Jiang Hai didn't say that it was inconvenient. After all, she is also a person in the entertainment industry and knows Selena Gomez. "Mr. Jiang is from Huaxia, right?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person didn't hesitate and sat directly on the sofa here, and then asked Jiang Hai. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also nodded. This is easy to guess. Since there are only 2 names, he can't be an islander. From the time they met, Jiang Hai has never bowed, which can be ruled out as a South Korean, so he can only be from Huaxia. Ashley Glynn's brain is still very fast. I don't know where Mr. Jiang made his fortune. After confirming Jiang Hai's nationality, she continued to ask with a smile, "Oh, I'm a cattle farmer." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also said indifferently. He was not wrong. He was a cattle farmer. In addition to cattle, he also raised fish. He said this everywhere, although it was a bit of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Wow, this is a very stable career, isn't it? Is your farm in Montana, or in California, or Texas? Hearing that Jiang Hai was a cattle farmer, Ashley Glynn was stunned for a moment, and then asked with some doubts. Chapter 10:22. Oh, they're not here. They're in the suburbs of Boston. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai also said indifferently. As soon as she heard Jiang Hai's words, Ashley Glynn's interest in Jiang Hai instantly changed from the original 60% to 5%, because in her opinion, a cattle ranch is naturally large. But if you want to occupy a large enough place, you need some empty mines and a large state. Montana, Texas, and Mexico are among the best places to raise cattle. One is vast and sparsely populated. The second is a large open grassland. And the third is basically the industry of all the major animal husbandry tycoons in the United States is here. The values of the Americans are not to laugh at the poor, nor are they the kind of people who have no bottom line to suck up to the rich. But in their hearts, the most important thing to measure a person is whether he has money. As long as the money comes from a legitimate source and is a stable income, they will welcome your existence. Of course, how much you earn also depends on your level. Just like Ashley Glynn now doesn't think that Jiang Hai is at the same level as her. These stars are very knowledgeable. People like Ashley Glynn naturally know that if a manor wants to make money, it doesn't need to be big, and if it wants to be big, it has to be in the 3 states mentioned above. Boston is one of the first states in the United States. Naturally, she knew how small that place was. She didn't think that there would be a big manor there. If there wasn't a big manor, it meant that Jiang Hai didn't have much money. If he didn't have much money, it meant that Selena Gomez had found a poor man. Whether Selena Gomez really has feelings for him and found a poor man, she doesn't care, but at least she won't make friends with such a person. So after a few words, she got up and left. Jiang Hai doesn't care about this. She doesn't want to leave. In fact, it doesn't have much to do with him. After she left, Selena Gomez came over with a smile. At least you are honest. Sitting next to Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez said happily. It seems that she also saw Ashley Glynn coming over just now. Otherwise, she would not be so happy. She knows how chaotic the American entertainment industry is. Now that she is gone, it means that she did not get anything out of Jiang Hai. It seems that Jiang Hai is quite honest. Of course. Are there any rewards? Upon hearing Selena Gomez's words, Jiang Hai looked at her with a smile and asked. After hearing what Jiang Hai said, she pretended to think for a moment. Tell me, what kind of reward do you want? A pair of big eyes stared unblinkingly at Jiang Hai as she asked him. When we do that at night, can you change into a few more sets of clothes? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled and leaned over. He saw a lot of good clothes just now. Well, for the sake of you being so obedient today. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez also said with a smile. After the two played here for almost an hour, the two left. When they returned home, Taraga was already resting in his room. As for Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez, they naturally went back shamelessly. This night, the two basically didn't sleep. In this night, the two changed almost 7 or 8 sets of clothes and played until dawn. The next morning, Selena Gomez couldn't stand it anymore and fell into a deep sleep. Jiang Hai was also afraid that she would hurt her body, but he really couldn't control himself last night. So before leaving, he deliberately injected aura into her body to strengthen her physical fitness. After that, he took Taraga to have breakfast and bought a set of food for Selena Gomez. After that, he went back to the manor with Taraga. After returning to the manor, looking at the new Taraga, the girls in Jiang Hai's manor were all asking. There was no woman who didn't like to be beautiful. Usually, everyone was the same, so it didn't matter. Now that Taraga had changed, they were also a little moved, especially Delina and Marion. One must know that the 3 of them often played together before. On the other hand, Tarag was quite generous. She bought clothes, makeup products, and a hairstyle that was specially designed for her in the dressing room. She also exchanged ideas with the 2 girls. However, what was suitable for her might not be suitable for Delina and the others. But for a while, the girls in Jiang Hai's manor also found something to play with. As for the older girls, they were also paying attention to these things. Since they were interested in these things, the next day, Chi Jia waved her hand and signaled everyone to go to Boston in batches, starting from tomorrow. Buying things and changing themselves couldn't just be Taraga, right? They also didn't lack money. When Taraga went to school on Monday, it can be said that it caused a sensation in her school. Many people in this high school knew that Taraga was rich and that she was living in Jiang Hai's manor. Therefore, no one dared to provoke her openly or secretly. However, not provoking her didn't mean that they would play with her, right? Especially looking at her rustic appearance. Only the carefree Bessie Oliver and the tomboyish Pearl Circe would play with her. But today, when she went to school, those people discovered that they were really blind. The girls were cursing the vixen and little slut in their hearts, while the boys were shouting beautiful women and goddesses in their hearts. Taraga originally wasn't ugly, and her facial features were very delicate. However, because she was in the mountains all year round, she was a little tanned and her skin wasn't very good. These days, although she ate a lot of good things, her skin returned to normal, but it was still very dark. In addition, she didn't wear makeup, didn't do her hair, didn't wear jewelry, and didn't wear any beautiful clothes, so she usually looked very rustic. But today, she was completely different. She had put on some light makeup on her skin. At least, She didn't look completely bronze anymore. Her facial features were more three-dimensional, her eyes were brighter, and her skin was more tender. Her button-down hair bounced up and down as she walked. She looked both intellectual and emotional. She was wearing the Versace clothes that she bought yesterday, with small Swarovski accessories on her hands and feet, plus a pair of casual shoes. She looked very lively and fashionable. As soon as she walked to school, she attracted a lot of attention. And under these people's admiring gazes, Taraga's confidence was rising rapidly. As the saying goes, 3 people make a tiger. When only one person said that you were beautiful, you might laugh at yourself. However, when 10,000 people said that you were beautiful, that person's self-confidence would expand infinitely. Tara was the same. Seeing her like this, her teacher Mary Jane specially called Jiang Hai and said that he did a good job. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Of course, he knew that he did a good job. In the next few days, the trend that Taraga brought about made Jiang Hai happy for a long time. Why? It was mainly because of an old saying. To be honest, Jiang Hai usually didn't pay much attention to makeup. At least, he rarely touched women with heavy makeup because you didn't know how scary she was after removing her makeup. It was precisely because of this that the women in Jiang Hai's manor basically didn't put on makeup. At most, they would apply some sunscreen or hydration products. Therefore, there were very few makeup products. Recently, the trend brought by Tarag had made these girls put on a little makeup. If they looked good, naturally, Jiang Hai would be the one to take advantage of it. In recent days, Jiang Hai felt that his waist might not be able to bear it, but he still enjoyed it and didn't get tired of it. When a person's life reached this level, there was no need to ask for more. Just like what Selena Gomez said, the things that men pursued were nothing more than those few points. Money, power, fame, women. Now that Jiang Hai had all these, it didn't matter if he became a salted fish or something. Speaking of money first, it was impossible for Jiang Hai to be as rich as a country, but it was no problem for him to be as rich as a province. Speaking of power, he was like a local tyrant in Winthrop and even in Boston. In China, he might have money but no power. He was probably meat on some people's plates and could be eaten whenever they wanted. But in the United States, he was the local tyrant. Speaking of fame, Jiang Hai's beef, fish, and forage were sold all over the world. He was quite famous. Finally, there were women. Jiang Hai was surrounded by beautiful women. If he wanted to sleep with them, he could sleep with them at any time. Moreover, he had a lot of choices. He could even do it together. Under such circumstances, what was there to strive for? He didn't have any thoughts of rushing out of the universe and going to the world. He could buy whatever he wanted, do whatever he wanted, eat whatever he wanted, and it was all the best. His life was like this, and he didn't have any other requirements. He wasn't one of those empty, lonely rich kids who had nothing to do but look for excitement. He was just an ordinary upstart. He didn't have any thoughts of changing the world. He just wanted to change his own life. Just as Jiang Hai was happily passing every day step by step, one day in late April, Dulles Gerard, who had gone to Europe to participate in this year's Magaon wine competition, called Jiang Hai and temporarily put an end to his happy daily life. Jiang Hai was a little unhappy about this, but even if he was unhappy, he still had to go to Europe. This time, Dulles Gerard really had something to discuss with Jiang Hai. A certain red wine distributor in Europe had taken a fancy to Jiang Hai's products. In order to expand the red wine market, Jiang Hai had to go. But the good news was that he could take his own plane. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.